Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, depending on where you are. Welcome to the special session of the 2020 GSEF Global Virtual Forum, promoting SSE through public policies, 7 case studies and guidelines for local governments, that is co-organized by United Cities and Local Governments, or UCLG, Global Social Economy Forum, or GSEF, and United Nations Research Institute for Social Development, or UNRISD. I'm Il-Chang Yi, Senior Research Coordinator at UNRISD, and I will moderate this session. Today, we are going to present outputs of the UNRISD project promoting SSE through public policies, guidelines for local governments, funded by and partnered with GSEF. There are 7 case studies and 1 guidelines for local governments. This session is a 3.5-hour long session, but there will be 2 breaks after first 3 presentations on 3 case studies and Q&A, and after second 4 presentations of 4 city case studies and Q&A. For smooth facilitation of this online forum, please mute your microphone, and if it is possible, turn off your camera too when you are not speaking. And if you have any questions or any urgent issues, please send your messages via chat window. Or you can also raise your hand virtually. If you want to raise your hand, please look for the participants button in Zoom and click this icon. And then look for the raise hand icon in the middle of the menu. If you click this, we will notify you have raised your hand. And if you finish your intervention, click your raise hand icon again to change it to lower hand symbol to avoid confusion. For your information, this session is simultaneously translated into 3 languages, French, Spanish, and English. If you look at the bottom of the Zoom screen, you can find interpretation symbol. Clicking the symbol, you will see the symbol of languages. And this session is going to be recorded. If you don't want to be recorded, you can let us know. We will edit the clips in which you are featured. Then, without further ado, I will call upon speakers who are going to deliver opening speeches. Firstly, I would like to call upon Sarah Ferlier of United Cities and Local Governments. Sarah, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon for some. Okay, so yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Yi, and also thanks to Lawrence and Arum from the GSF. The GSF has building now for a couple of years a lot of awareness inside UCLG on the concept of social and solidarity economy, and it is a very supported concept by our leaders, which is a really vast communities of local government, their associations and their mayors. And maybe in our understanding in UCLG, we have a twofold understanding. First, the local solidarity for inclusive development, and also global solidarity for a sustainable and peaceful planet. So both approaches are interconnected through the same people, through the local authorities, the councillors, the mayors that work with them in the different places. So our expectation from UCLG of the session today is learning from the lessons of local government that applied concrete policies to strengthen the social solidarity economy. And I would like to congratulate the study so far. We have been looking into it, and it is a really promising research you are applying. So for the 7 cities that are studied because they have developed policies, program, and institution, the projects should allow to reflect on their own innovation and sustainability and highlight their good practices internationally. And for a broader community, as a UCLG community, the project should provide key elements to identify, plan, and support their SSE ecosystem. This is a longer endeavor that may require more steps like this webinar, but more exchange, more peer learning, more knowledge management and policy debate. And we are open to this, but it definitely seems a big opportunity and a very big priority to connect and motivate cooperation. We run through an unprecedented challenge. The COVID-19 is marking a new time and local government suffer losses and stress. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we listen to our leaders. They are facing the crisis, working with their community, motivated by the spirit of solidarity. So this spirit, what we can say, the intention for policy making is a starting point, and it is shared and followed by who and what we need to do. In these months and years to come, the how also need to be shared. Do you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Good. So for this, we hope that the examples, the policies, the proceeding, the financing, the regulations or the deregulations can be learning lessons and provide insight about successes and failures. The local government should not only be the only target of this guide which you are preparing, because often their influence on international on institutional environment is limited, in particular in local economy. It is true, and the empirical analysis of the study provides evidence that the holistic approach of the local government is their way of working. But how many local governments support SSE without having a clear competences and in particular fiscal means to do this? So we should not confine the approach. The COVID already confines our bodies, but not the thoughts. Actually, in UCLG, we have been revisiting the policy priorities with our leaders, and COVID-19 helped us to sharpen our vision for the future. So based on a very broad live learning consultation beyond the outbreak with our leaders and partners, and I will give you the link later in the chat, we summarize the vision in a decalogue, which you can find in our web and social media. It is not a given that basic services are public services. It is not a given we have a multilateral system. It is not a given we have a financial autonomy, local democracy. All this requires value. All this requires solidarity. The partnership that we have around the World Urban Forum and on local economic development, the LED Forum, is an opportunity for further articulation. And we welcome your involvement in the roadmap towards the forum event in May 2021. And we are very happy also that we have here a colleague of the UNDP Art, who is also a key actor in the forum. We dedicated many live learning sessions also to local economic development. So this is a top priority of the cities that are facing the pandemic, which is destroying millions and millions of jobs. So we learned that SSE, social solidarity economy, can strengthen and inform the efforts of many local governments supporting small and medium-sized and household entrepreneurship. The cooperatives can empower, in particular, women. And we would like to stress this point also to be taken up with more emphasis in your research. The dialogues between private and public sector on development based on the territory are taking place. The pandemic can be a turning point for a new way to measure economy, for a new basis of productivity and well-being. Thank you very much, and I will be here with you and also with my colleague Juan Carlos Uribe, who is joining also from UCLG Learning Department, which I have the honor to coordinate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Our next speaker is Andrea Agostinucci, Local Economic Advisor for the UNDP Art Initiative. Andrea Agostinucci, the floor is yours.
Okay, then good afternoon for us from Rome in particular, and good morning, good evening, I guess good night also for some of you in different parts of the world. And really to begin, many thanks really to GSF and UNRIST colleagues for this opportunity to address a few words in the opening of this session. I think it is dedicated to a very relevant and important work in a very critical, I believe, research area. Just to quickly start with the context, as we all know, we are in the middle of a quite unprecedented global crisis that is forcing us to think and to act differently. It is important that we start adopting transformative approaches that facilitated transition to more just, more resilient and sustainable societies. We believe that territories are key to this endeavor and that sustainable development goals are more than ever relevant to frame it. It is crucial, therefore, to build stronger, renewed alliances and strategies for enabling the effective implementation of the SDGs, starting from the local level and cutting across multi-level governance frameworks. Now, alternative economic models like the social and solidarity economy have an immense potential as catalysts of the transformative territorial processes that are much needed for bridging recovery with a just transition under an umbrella of effective SDGs localization processes and frameworks. Indeed, the potential of SSE is rooted in its nature as an inherently local, multi-actor and multidimensional processes that allows addressing social and environmental problems through resources, capacities, and relations that are embedded in localities and that are unlocked through collective intelligence and democratic self-management. SSE can help creating economic value while addressing societal needs, turning communities' labor, cohesion, and well-being into key factors for economic development, a connecting offer and demand of core goods and services as part of integrated and localized circuits of production and consumption. Moreover, SSE actors and organizations are showing a strong deal of resilience in the face of the crisis and an even stronger capacity to tackle some of its consequences, becoming kind of champions of a new development model that is at the intersection of economic efficiency, resilience, equity, and ecological balance. Now, to actually leverage this full transformative potential of SSE, it is crucial, absolutely crucial, to entrench it in societal and governance processes and to mainstream it in national and subnational policies. National frameworks in this sense, legal and policy frameworks, are crucial preconditions, but are not sufficient ones to establish conducive environments for SSE to thrive in its natural setting, which is, at the end of the day, communities at the local and territorial levels. More specific conditions and mechanisms are therefore needed and must be established at the local level to enable a stronger SSE sector and a more effective response to the challenges that it seeks to address. This, again, in turn requires a systemic approach that fully connects and integrates SSE with the key drivers or the key building blocks of local development and local economic development processes in particular. This can refer to policy and decision-making, governance mechanisms, support services and funding, information, data management, research, innovation, capacity building, communication, marketing, and the like. In turn, again, specifically in today's situation, this entails and requires that local and cities governments conceive and adopt SSE as a key dimension of comprehensive response strategies to rebuild local economies on different grounds, and not only, as it is still often the case, as residual or transitory solutions to specific problems. As UNDP, as you might know, we lead the socio-economic component of the global UN recovery effort to the COVID crisis. In this framework, we've produced more than 100 socio-economic assessments. Most of them point to the local level as a key entry point for enacting effective rehabilitation strategies. And more specifically, as UNDP Art Initiative, we work at channeling effective recovery solutions at the local level under an overall SDGs localization framework. This obviously includes promoting the vital role and potential of SSE. And we do that in our capacity as members of the UN Task Force for Social and Solidarity Economy, as co-organizers of the World Forum on Local Economic Development that was mentioned by Sarah, alongside UCLG and other partners, and gradually integrating an SSE perspective and component as part of our country-level efforts, specifically programs on local governance, local development, local economic development, and SDGs localization. Previous editions of the World LED Forum have highlighted the huge potential of combining SSE as part of local policies and systems for SDGs implementation. And I think that today this nexus between SSE and local systems acquires an even stronger relevance as a driver of transformative response strategies that are centered in territories. To conclude, on this basis, we highly value this innovative work by Unrisk and GSF, in particular the elaboration of a guideline for local authorities in a crucial, but I believe still rather unexplored area for public policy making applied to local ecosystems. This could constitute a very valuable input for UNDP work and specifically country-level programming. And we stand ready to continue discussions that, by the way, we've already started with colleagues of GSF and Unrisk in the framework of the task force and beyond to develop concrete synergies in this area and specifically possibly applying the findings of this research on the ground. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Andrea. If you speak very fast, I mean, the interpreters would have problem in translating your valuable contribution into other languages. So all those participants are recommended to speak slowly, to be very kind to interpreters, please. Thank you. And finally, I'd like to call upon Lawrence Kwok, Secretary General of GSEF, as a speaker to deliver opening remarks. Lawrence, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. Welcome to this special thematic section on promoting social solidarity economy through public policies, 7 case studies and guidelines for local government, co-organized by the UNIS, GSEF, and UCLG, held on the very first day of the 2020 GSEF Global Virtual Forum on Great Challenges, Greater Solidarity, Power of Community and Social Solidarity Economy as a Path for Transformation, which has just inaugurated with more than 870 people connected from 102 countries. Actually, there are more than 2,000 people registered for our forum. It's really a big success. I'm very honored to address this opening remark on behalf of GSEF and also UCLG Community of Practice on the Social Solidarity Economy to express my sincere thanks and gratitude to the team of eminent researchers from 7 cities and countries who have responded with their expertise, interest, dedication, and passion to this very important and ambitious research project. My special thanks and gratitude also go to the UNIS team, in particular, Dr. Il-Chang Lee, Senior Research Coordinator, and Samuel Buruliso, Research Analyst at UNIS, who have coordinated this research project for the past 2 years and have been working with the GSEF Secretariat to make this section a reality for today. I also want to express my very special thanks to Sarah Hoflich with her team of UCLG Learning Department, Pablo Fernandez, Juan Carlos Uribe Vega. We all know that the role of the UCLG is very important to accompany local government around the world who are increasingly interested to promote social solidarity economy public policies to respond to the growing need of its citizens for an inclusive and sustainable development for all. I also thank to Andrea Agostinucci, Local Economic Development Advisor for the UNDP ART, with whom we have been working for the World Local Economic Development Forum and also recently exploring the perspective for future collaboration to better use and diffuse these guidelines for local government that would greatly help to recognize social solidarity economy's role and potential by decision and policymakers to better elevate the current social economic crisis and as a strategy to promote sustainable and inclusive development. It is important to note that interest in social solidarity economy has risen sharply in recent years, especially in times of great crisis, such as the global financial crisis of 2008-09, and currently in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. As the search for an alternative to current socio-economic system has become an urgent task for policymakers and local and national government, social solidarity economy is seen as a possible alternative strategy to drive transformation needed and as a strategic means to implement the Sustainable Development Goals in a more cost-effective and synergetic manner. I believe that UN Task Force for Social Solidarity Economy, as well as the key international networks such of the social solidarity economy, such as the RIPES, International Forum of Social Solidarity Economy, and GSEF, have also contributed a lot for this growing visibility and the global recognition of the role and potential of the social solidarity economy. However, I would like to acknowledge today in a very special way the great and important contribution made by researchers who have engaged to deepen understanding of social solidarity economy by making practices and actions of social solidarity economy to be interpreted in the language of policy making and also be measured in terms of great political and social impact for local, national, and international police circles for its critical role in transforming social and economic relations and systems. Some of most representative of them are present today for this section, so I take this opportunity to express our sincere thanks and appreciation to them for their contribution by raising the visibility of social solidarity economy as a strategy to achieve social and economic transformation needed for our society, and especially to contextualize and achieve the social sustainable development goals at the local level, which is the primary reason for the production of this research outcome. I sincerely hope that today's section will greatly contribute for the greater awareness about the role of social solidarity economy in facilitating inclusive and sustainable development, insufficiently recognized by decision makers and by government, both at national and local levels. I'm excited to listen to our eminent speakers today to learn about their strategies and visions on how to help our government to better promote social solidarity economy public policies and mainstream social solidarity economy into the national and global development agendas. Let's listen to them and learn on how we can better work with our government to build co-constructed public policies through social solidarity economy as part for transformation to face great challenges together with greater solidarity. Thanks a lot for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lawrence. Now we will go into the discussion on the project and its outputs. Firstly, I will briefly introduce the project itself. For the sake of time management, we prepared pre-recorded presentation on mine. Here it goes. Samuel.
Morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, depending on where you are. I'm Il Chang-hee, Senior Research Coordinator at UNRIST. Today I'm going to talk about UNRIST project promoting SSE through public policies, guidelines for local government. On behalf of UNRIST SSE project team, including Samuel Alfred Brueli Sauer, Kamini Chada, Hamish Jenkins, and me. SSE research in UNRIST started with the project Potential and Limits of Social and Solidarity Economy in 2012. Since then, we have had around 7 research projects and 3 key international events, including Potential and Limits of Social and Solidarity Economy conference in 2013 and UN Task Force conference on implementing the Sustainable Development Goals, what role for social and solidarity economy in 2019. And the project we are going to talk about today, promoting SSE through public policies, is one of the latest projects. With these projects and key events, UNRIST has contributed to mainstreaming SSE within and beyond the UN system. This guidelines project has kind of 4 pillars which became the basis of this project. First one is interview with policymakers of selected national and local governments to identify policy needs and demands. Based on this interview and extensive literature review, we could establish policy and institutional framework of SSE ecosystem and selected cities for case studies. We got 7 case studies on cities, including Barcelona, Dakar, Durban, Liverpool, Mexico City, Seoul, and Montreal. And lastly, the guidelines itself, which became one of the major outputs of this project. This guidelines has 10 chapters, including introduction explaining the bolts and nuts of SSE ecosystem, and the substance of individual chapters will be explained by my colleague Hamish Jenkins in his presentation. This guidelines has 4 distinctive features. The first one is it has been written from the perspective of policymakers who are willing to promote SSEOEs in their own local areas. And for these policymakers, it has been written in plain and simple languages which convey the messages or information about SSE to policymakers who are trying to establish policy and institutional frameworks and programs for SSE. And as I mentioned, it is composed of 10 chapters dealing with bolts and nuts of SSE ecosystem. And every chapter has a guidance section which has flowchart system of question and answers which will guide users to relevant information. As you can see in guidance section, which you can find in every chapter, you can find a series of questions, and users do not have to worry about getting answers right, because the whole idea behind these questions is to help users to find the relevant information to their research concerns or policy concerns and interests. And we recommend multi-stakeholder group exercises which can facilitate discussions between stakeholders and policymakers for policy making and institution making for SSE. We are thinking about follow-up activities as well. And obviously, we are going to disseminate findings and lessons of 7 case studies. And we are going to engage with training and education courses with these guidelines for local governments. And we are planning to elaborate this guideline to possibly produce guidelines version 2.0 based on the feedback from the users. And if funding is available, we can launch a new project, Guidelines for National Government, which is going to be national version of these guidelines for policies to promote SSE. Thank you for listening.
Okay, I give thanks to myself. and as I mentioned in the introduction of the project, we have produced 7 excellent case studies, and their authors are with us today. In the first subsession, we will discuss the cases of Seoul, Mexico City, and Durban. We will first go for the Seoul case study. Gil-sun and Sang-yun, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sang-yun Lee. Can I share my slide by myself, or Sam will share from me? I don't know exactly.
I will share it. Sorry, 1 second.
I think I can share if you.
There you go.
Okay.
Sorry. Yes.
Okay. My name is Sang-yun Lee. I'm from Seoul, South Korea. I'm working at Seongonghae University. I'm very happy to share and contribute Seoul case of the UN RISD project. Thank you so much again. Next. As you know, this presentation is based on my working paper with my co-author, Gilsun Yoon. Next. My talks divide two parts. First, I briefly explain the situation of social economy in South Korea, and then I will jump to Seoul's case, and then I will wrap up with my thoughts. Next. As you can see here, the inequality level in South Korea is quite high. Tangibles, big conglomerates consist of 40% of total GDP in South Korea, which leads the discussion of a social economy, I think. Next. However, I think there is no universal concept about social economy as well as scope of a social economy. But anyway, so far in 2020, two bills are proposed and under review before going to National Assembly. Two bills are quite similar, and it defines the social economy, as you can see here, is quite a general concept, as we may know quite well. Next. Two bills have common organization, which is the 13 organization for social and solidarity enterprises, including cooperatives and social enterprises and community enterprises and other cooperatives as well. Next. But this bill is not like built alone. Actually, before these bills, I think Seoul's ordinance is quite functioned well to propose the national bills for social economy. As you can see here, Seoul government enact various legal actions. Next. As a result, this is not like the statistics of Seoul, but in general, the statistics about social and solidarity enterprises in South Korea. As you can see here, is the end of 2018, where more than like 20,000 enterprises exist, and more than it's almost like 300,000 workers work in this sector. Next. These four enterprises are main target by policy at the national level. Next. This is actually originated from, I think, the Ministry of Employment and Labor's Master Plan for Human Resource Development for Social Economy. So actually, the Korean Social Enterprise Promotion Agency run this program, and many young entrepreneurs for social economy actually propose their idea to get funded. Next. Now we discuss more deeply about Seoul's case. Next. As you can see here, in 2020, more than 4,000 cooperatives existed only in Seoul as of September 2020. Mainly, the cooperatives are main type of enterprises. Next. This result is originated by the public and private policymaking partnership, and they set up Seoul Social Economy Center based on this partnership. I think this is very important action and contribute to creating positive political momentum for social and solidarity enterprises, and also it influences hugely to other local governments. Next. From this partnership, the Seoul Social Economy Center was set up, founded, and as you can see here, the center had played several roles, including identifying and providing support for social and solidarity enterprises, and fostering online and offline hubs for networking, etc. Next. Right now, I explain about the major initiatives in Seoul. First, education program. Based on the partnership, Seoul City Government developed the Social Economy Academy, and from this program, more than, I think, 7,000 citizens educated, and 45 courses are developed about social economy. Next. This is the website of Social Economy Academy, and if you visit here, you can watch the online video clip about social economy in general, as well as management skills, including marketing and financing, etc. Next. My university, which is Seonggonghae University, one of the education institution, and we run actually the social economy education program on behalf of Seoul City Government. Yearly, more than 50 students, I would say students, enroll this program, and then they are eager to learn how to run their organization. Next. Financing is very important, and Seoul City Government set up a Seoul Investment Fund. As you can see here, for 5 years, they assigned several budget with a private partnership. Well, but it is quite controversial. This fund is really efficient or effective or not. Anyway, move to the next page. The other major initiative is public procurement for social and solidarity enterprises by Seoul City Government. Actually, Seoul City Government passed 2 ordinance for public procurement. So since then, as you can see here, the size of sales of SSE is increasing, but still the portion is quite limited. It's just 1.3%, I think, of total, procurement in Seoul City Government. But it will be get better soon. Next. This is information webpage. If you visit Seoul Social Economy Portal, I think you can get all kind of information, including education information, financing information, even hiring information, etc. So this website is really crucial, and monthly more than 100 posted, 100 video clips and letters are uploaded, and monthly, I think more than 10,000 citizens visit this portal to get information about social economy. Next. Last year, Seoul City Government announced a Social Economy Promotion Plan 2.0. Mainly, it emphasized the participation of citizens, because the citizens' participation is quite important to boost a social economy. That's probably the reason why this plan emphasized the participation of normal citizens. Next. Well, as a wrap up, I do believe that next slide, please. I do believe that legal and various public policy measures are quite important fundamentally, but however, the autonomy and independence and management skills of social and solidarity enterprises are also important so that we can boost the social economy together. Next. All right, this is my story about Seoul. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me as the email. Thank you.
Thank you, Sang-Yun. Before I move on to Mexico City case study, I have a small announcement to facilitate this interpretation. I mean, when you are speaking, you have to select off button in interpretation symbol. Otherwise, there will be some problems in interpretation functions. So now I'd like to ask Roberto Canedo to present the case on Mexico City. The floor is yours, Roberto.
Buen día. El presente trabajo denominado...
Good afternoon. Now, this is a paper that we've done on policies to promote social and solidarity economy, the case study of Mexico, which we did in conjunction with the UNRIST, United Nations Research Institute for Social Development. The project is on promoting social and solidarity economy through public policies, guidelines for local governments. So this study is a study on the experiences of Mexico City as to the characteristics of the design and implementation of public policies for promoting SSE. These are policies that were introduced between 2016 and 2019. Now, we should first of all mention that there is a historical background here. The origins of these policies date back to 2000. However, it was not until 2007 that specific programs to promote and strengthen that the Ministry of Labor and Employment Promotion actually began to implement specific programs for cooperatives. It drew on indirect budgets from various departments of the government of federal districts, which is now known as the government of Mexico City. Then it had its own budget. Then between 2014, the program for the promotion, strengthening and integration of cooperatives, the PPFIC, was established. A total of 157 cooperatives were supported. That comprises 2,442 people. In 2015, the support program for the development of cooperatives in Mexico City was then launched. And then in 2000, we had the program for the promotion, establishment, and strengthening of social and solidarity enterprises. That's known as FOCOFES for short. The methodology that we employed was carried out over 3 different stages. In the first stage, we carried out an exhaustive review of the relevant resources, books, articles, documents, laws, regulations, journals of legislative debates, and also in particular the rules of operation of the various different programs. We also reviewed the calls and evaluations that were published in the official Gazette of the Federal District in 2016 and in 2017 in the official Gazette of Mexico City. Then we moved on to the second stage that involved the gathering of information in the field from key informants, namely officials and former employees of departments, but also managers and members of the beneficiary cooperatives and instructors that were accredited by STIFE, the government department, and we also consulted scholars. At the third stage, the final stage, we gathered information and then we organized and analyzed this information to finally draft the final report. Now, during this period of study, we made the following findings. First of all, the public policy to promote SSE in the City of Mexico was maintained to a large extent by the forces of legal and institutional inertia, and also as a result of the pressure of existing social demand. Furthermore, there's a subsidiary, complementary, and dependent element of the general social policy of the government of Mexico City. This includes, for example, programs to combat unemployment. Number 3, between 2015 and 2018, very modest results were achieved, and these results were tempered by muddled management by officials and beneficiaries of the SSE support resources and programs. Fourth point, from 2019 forwards, with the FOCO-FES program, public policy underwent a significant shift. It introduced highly centralized administrative procedures that were aimed at eradicating corruption. However, the implementation of these procedures resulted in all kinds of excesses. An example could be the mass dismissal of personnel, the failure to rehire trained instructors, and also to renew the positive aspects of the previous programs. Number 5, as part of the Republican austerity policy in force in Mexico at the time, only 16 staff members were rehired. This was insufficient for the scale of the targets that were to be achieved. As a result of this, the institutional structure was overwhelmed by the magnitude of the demand. So if we look at the SPI, which is the promotion program, it quickly achieved its target, but the way that the cooperatives were set up was defective. This suggests that very few of these cooperatives are going to survive even in the short term. And in the case of the SPF, the other program, the strengthening program, these targets were not reached. So if we look at the FOCO-FES program, it lacked precision or strategic clarity. And those that were responsible for implementing it were not able to measure, to guide or channel the transformative and innovative potential of SSE. Instead of implementing a vital and organic public policy, instead of using an ongoing and constructive dialogue with beneficiaries, all they have managed to do is implement it in an instrumental sense. They've simply limited themselves to complying with formalities of administrative processes. They've fulfilled quantitative goals, but the problem is that they have not thought about its direction or management in a strategic sense. Next point is that the current legal framework is not being implemented, it's not being enhanced. So this means it's out of step with advances in the constitutional text of the city. It also means it's at odds with other legal systems.
Could you please mute yourself if you haven't yet, because we hear background noises. Whoever has the microphone still open.
It's iPhone de Maria is making, the background noise is coming from iPhone de Maria.
Okay.
So the legal framework is out of step with procurement law, with social development law. There's a need to align all legislation applicable to SSE enterprises with the local constitution. There's also a need to undertake a comprehensive reform of the law. And amongst other things, this is going to enable these regulations to bed down, as it were, in the different municipalities. Next point. The way that the programs are implemented is just not adequate. There's no objective diagnosis of the conditions in which the cooperatives pursue their organizational and entrepreneurial activities. There's a lack of studies and research on this subject. And there's no clear directory on the work that's being done by the implementing institution. This shows, this would show us how many and which cooperatives have been supported and what the tangible results have been, but we do not have this. So therefore, we require the preparation of an updated directory of existing cooperatives in Mexico City. This is a task that cannot be delayed any longer. We need to aim to create an updated and reliable register of cooperatives that's available to all in physical and digital form, and also that's freely accessible to the general public. Moreover, there's excessive inflexibility in the way that the programs work, and they're also very short. This means that administrative procedures need to be streamlined. They need to be made more flexible to make them less complex and less bureaucratic. There needs to be a commitment to digitalizing procedures, also digitalizing the delivery of documents. If we speed up the process, then we'll be able to publish responses to applications online. This will contribute to transparency in the allocation of public funds. So our recommendation is this study first of all recommends that we reduce the number of home visits as part of the training exercise. This will be essential. So we should establish a procedure for the geo-referencing of each of the beneficiary cooperatives, and this will help us to have real-time status updates. Next recommendation. We need to overcome institutional short-termism. We need to develop multi-year programs that will help us to achieve more far-reaching goals. In a period of between 5 and 10 years, we could achieve a hard consolidated core of several dozens of cooperatives. If we had this, they would then act as a guiding force to support the social action of the rest of the cooperatives. These could be cooperatives that have been recently created or that are in the process of consolidation. And thus we would achieve the sustainability of the local cooperative movement. Next recommendation, we need to place limits on intergroup conflicts. These are conflicts in the management of institutional spaces. There's a constant turnover of senior officials, and there's an inability to form cohesive working teams between middle management and operational management. We need to overcome this to ensure continuity and so that we can fully complete all of these programs. Next recommendation, we have to put an end to the lack of coordination between the various public bodies, particularly at the level of the City of Mexico, the government, and of the government of the 16 municipalities of Mexico City. Next point, we need to ensure that SSE promotion programs avoid cronyism. We've seen a clientelistic apportionment of quotas amongst all the power groups. So it would be advisable in the coming years to place a greater emphasis on qualitative aspects, i.e. training and technical support, over the quantitative aspects, i.e. number of cooperatives formed or strengthened. The targets of the FOCOFES program should therefore be rethought in comparison to the targets that were set for 2019. Final recommendation, we need to have permanent assessment of these programs by institutions that are external to the government of Mexico City. This will allow for feedback, improvements in key aspects such as training, technical assistance, financial support, access to markets, dialogue with the cooperative movement, and finally with dissemination of the programs and their achievements. Thank you very much.
Now we will go for the final presentation of Durban case, which is going to be the last one for this first sub-session. Susan?
Creating an enabling solidarity economy, SSE, through public policies in Durban, South Africa. The city of Durban is known in municipal context as the eThekwini Metropolitan Municipality. I refer to it as ETMM, referring to the larger area of the metropole. eThekwini is derived from the word Iteko, meaning bay or lagoon in Zulu, and is a popular destination for a seaside holiday. Durban is the third most populous city in South Africa and the largest city in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. These maps contextualize Durban within the eThekwini metropole in South Africa by firstly showing in the upper left corner the 9 provinces of South Africa. Then next to it, in the upper right, the provinces are divided in municipal districts, followed by a map of the district of KwaZulu-Natal, bottom left, and then the map of the eThekwini Metropolitan Municipality showing the location of Durban, bottom right slide. The SSE in context of the 3 levels of government. The first level of government is the national government, elected and responsible for approving laws and policies by Parliament. The provincial legislator develop and approve strategies for these laws and policies. While local government, it is the ETMM or Durban, the implementation guidelines for the strategies of the provincial legislator are developed and executed on municipal levels. Synergistic relationships on all levels of government, together with stakeholders, are required for and a prerequisite for successful implementation. It's very important to understand that it is required by law that the government of South Africa consult very broadly before a law is brought to Parliament, or even an implementation of the law is being done. The size of the SSE in South Africa. Active entities are operational while inactive entities are either dormant, did not submit the annual reports, or is a shelf company. That means it's bought by, for instance, an attorney to be kept in an office until a client wants to purchase the company. 30% of non-SSE companies are active, while 80% of SSEOs are active. Accordingly, the focus is on active SSEOs and active non-SSEOs for purposes of analysis. The SSE sector in terms of functional entities is much larger than estimated. Therefore, the SSE represents 17% of the total of all active registered entities in both sectors, while the remaining 83% represents the non-SSEOs. Policies and institutions. The ETMM's main approach capitalize and synergize existing policies, frameworks, and acts. The Cooperative Development Plan, or CDP, is an example. The ETTM assisted their work streams such as grass cutting, cleaning, and other services to transform into cooperatives with awarded contracts through the preferential procurement policies. The Durban Chamber of Commerce and Industry, DCCI, leverage existing legislation on enterprise development to assist the SSE in becoming sustainable, and they provide training. Universities are expected to serve the communities in which they operate and therefore have several programs for community engagement and furthering enterprise development. The private sector engages policies such as corporate social responsibility, broad-based Black economic empowerment, BBEE, and the enterprise development policy to assist the SSE through grants, training, and preferential procurement. Stakeholders and actors. The ETMM is the exemplar in local government context in creating an enabling environment for the development of SSE organizations. Durban Chamber of Commerce and Industry, DCCI, supports the SSE through training, mentoring, and other services. All levels of government are actively participating in the promotion and development of the SSE. Universities, University of KwaZulu-Natal and Durban University of Technology, leverage existing legislation to train the SSEOs in the management of enterprises. Several institutions such as apex bodies, associations, financial and cooperative banks are actively involved in promoting and developing the SSEOs. International Labour Organization sponsored the facilitation for a draft green paper on the social economy. Marketing SS goods and services, ETMM, facilitate access to markets where possible, local, national, international. Link SSE to retail outlets. The annual Durban Fair exhibit their goods, create a platform for networking for business with the private sector. Government agencies, example is CEDA, training with inter alia marketing and providing linkages to commerce and industry as well. DCCI links the SSEO to clusters within the chambers geared to assist the SSE to make more significant impact in their communities. Organizations or associations or other stakeholders that promote the SSE and link them to opportunities. Finance and access to finance. Preferential procurement through the public and private sector is deemed to be part of enterprise development. The private sector receives tax breaks for corporate social responsibility, CSR, and enterprise development. The eThekwini Metropolitan Municipality does not provide direct funding, but in the case of charities or social enterprises, the ETMM provides an annual grant. Small Enterprise Development Agency, CEDA, has a cooperative incentive scheme with a 100% grant of 350,000 South African rands to registered primary cooperatives. The Small Enterprise Finance Agency, or SEFA, the Independent Development Corporation, IDC, and cooperative banks provide loans to SSEOs with certain conditions. Training and capacity building. Stakeholders believe training and capacity building are key to SSEO's sustainability and scalability. Example, the ETMM training program, also known as non-financial support, covers several management areas such as governance, financial literacy, marketing, and solving conflicts. Incubators are sponsored by CEDAW for the ETMM, as well as the 2 universities. Some social enterprises, the DCCI, sector apex bodies, and government departments provide training and capacity building for the SSEOs. Scaling up and monitoring and evaluation. Scaling up requires access to finance, planning, funding, and the right systems, staff, processes, technology, and partners. Connecting with other enterprises and networking enables this process of scaling up the enterprise, apart from hard work and access to finance. Monitoring and evaluation, or M&E, the formalized framework with which the ETMM will monitor and evaluate the cooperatives to ensure that planned milestones are achieved, has been approved. M&E would serve as an early warning system to alert the underachievement. The continuous sharpening and focusing will assist ETMM in the mobilization of appropriate interventions. Projects and grants are monitored and evaluated by the private sector funders themselves. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all wonderful presentations. We are behind the schedule by around 17 minutes, so I would suggest to reduce Q&A by 5 minutes and break 5 minutes as well. So we will have 15 minutes Q&A time instead of 20 minutes. And for your information, I will ask presenters to share their presentation files with us. So we will put them or upload them to a website of GSEF or UNRIST. So if you want to have a look at the presentation files, please visit either a GSEF website or UNRIST website. So I will open the floor for Q&A. So if you have any questions or comments, please raise your hand. I told you how to raise your hand in Zoom. So if you go to participants and you can find raise hand button, and if you click that symbol, I will notice you raise the hand. Okay, I will open the floor. So we have a question from Alan Sutton, Liverpool University. What do the authors believe is driving growth in SSE? So what would be the drivers of growth in SSE? I think obviously we are talking about public policies. So maybe authors can talk about key policies to drive the growth in SSE in different contexts, like Durban, Mexico City, and so. Maybe we can start with Durban. Susan?
I think that the biggest drivers in the case of Durban is actually on local government level, where the implementation actually comes into operation. So once you have the local government buying into and the provincial government providing the strategy, the implementation is really the driver. And in the case of Durban, the Durban municipality unbundled all their work streams for grass cutting, for feeding, and so on. And that actually allowed them to become cooperatives. And these cooperatives act independently, but through the preferential procurement, which is a very important policy, they actually get the contracts from the municipality to carry on the work. But this is a vibrant cooperatives that are in Durban, and that policy interpretation and with other laws because we have the cooperative law of 2005, but we have other laws like preferential procurement. We've got enterprise development, where the private sector is rewarded by tax breaks to actually train, to provide opportunities and preferential procurement to the SSE, as well as CSR providing the SSE with not only with loans, but also with grants or projects that they have to carry out on behalf of the private sector. So this is the enabling policies play a very important role, as well as the interpretations, on the other hand, to boost the social and solidarity economy in Durban.
Thank you very much. Maybe Mexico City case from Roberto.
Bueno, creo que hay que entender una cosa. En el caso de...
Thank you. I think there's one thing we need to understand in terms of growth in SSE. Well, it has been incredibly fast. If you have a crisis, I think that leads to the social and solidarity economy expanding very rapidly. And over the last 3 decades, we have gone from seeking to implement drastic neoliberal policies, and that marginalized the SSE sector. But we did indeed have the possibilities to expand, and the main actors, the main stakeholders involved did indeed address the issue. And we found that they looked at inefficiency and corruption cases, and now we're entering a new era where SSE is growing significantly, but we're trying to put everything in the right place now so that we can ensure that the realities of the SSE sector is reflected through the policies. We need the right public policy so as to ensure that we can bring forward the proposals for coordinating public policy, reorganizing the movement, and ensuring interaction between the two. But I think that we are indeed in a crisis for SSE, but an expansion crisis. So it's positive in a way.
A few other questions as well.
Thank you very much. I think there are several questions about the independence or autonomy of social economy. For instance, if there is a kind of dominant control of the state in economic sectors, I mean, what would be the role of SSE? I mean, how SSE can maintain their goals and objectives, and if there is a kind of dominant market force, so people will invest their money for economic gains only, what would be the role of SSE? I think that those questions can be applied to all those SSE actors and policymakers. And maybe I can direct these questions to Sang-Yun. I mean, if there is a kind of strong state control over economic issues, and what should be the role of SSE to maintain their objectives and to be functional in managing social and economic activities and objectives?
Thank you for asking. Well, fundamentally, I think legal and institutional frameworks are quite important to boost the social ecosystem, because the official status of this institution itself, I think, enhance the visibility of SSE's policy agenda, especially lawmakers should know, I mean, about what are important things in our economy. And also the legal frameworks contribute to creating favor in policy and political environment. So fundamentally, I do believe that, I mean, it's too much maybe Korean context, but I think legal and institutional frameworks are important. At the same time, improving management skills and understanding social concept by SSEs are also important. I mean, in some cases in South Korea, to just get fund, they looks like social and solidarity enterprises, but actually, finally, they just want to pursue the money or the fund and finally gone. So I think to remedy this problem, education programs are quite important, and nationally or locally, I think local government especially boost to enhance the education program for the social economy. What is social economy? What's their role? Something like that. And in addition, I think they should provide the management consulting kind of services to improve their management skills of SSEs, so that they can be independent from the government fund, and also they should know how they should run their organization democratically. So democratic control is quite important to SSEs. So education and training program for social enterprises quite important, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, there are some questions about the key challenges to public policies to promote SSE and the influence of political context on SSE too. I think those questions are the key questions to policymakers, especially those politicians in the context of local areas. And now we have a comment from Ronald, the mayor of Nakawa in Kampala, Uganda. I think he's a politician and policymaker of social the policies for SSE in the context of local government. So I think maybe we can get some answers to these questions. Okay, Ronald, floor is yours.
Good morning to everybody. My name is Balimwezo Ronald Jesuga. I'm the mayor of Nakawa Division, Kampala. Mine is a small one. We have a very big challenge that most of the SSEs are informal, and that government has put very, very many bureaucratic and unrealistic requirements for them to register. Formalizing SSEs in Uganda is still an end to meet, and yet majority of our people are very, very, very poor. I wonder what we could do in order to basically be able to register some of these SSEs.
Okay, thank you very much. I think those questions should be dealt with in the second part of this discussion when we talk about 4 case studies, because all those questions are relevant to local governments, and maybe we can get some answers from the case studies presentations by the following presenters on Montreal, Barcelona, and other cities, Liverpool. So we can listen to those presentations to think about answers to those questions. And I suggest to have a break, but very short break, 5 minutes break. So we're going to resume at within 5 minutes. So it's going to be 5 to 19 in Geneva time. Depending on where you are, you can calculate the time, but you can have practically 5 minutes break. So we will resume again. Thank you very much for joining us for the first part of this discussion, and I will see you again very soon. Thank you. And if it was a physical meeting, it could have been a time to take a group photo, but we kind of improvised kind of an innovative approach to group photo. So please turn on your camera and try to show your best side to the camera. And we're going to have a screenshot instead of group photo. So please turn on your camera and show your best side. And our cameraman Samuel Brewery Sour will take a screenshot, all of you. So Juan Jose Rojas, I mean, I don't see you. Arun and Lawrence, they all maybe, okay. So are you ready? Are you ready? So, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, you got it, Samuel? Okay,
Yes,
great.
I got a couple.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. So we will resume the session, and this session is going to be the presentation of 4 case studies, and we will go for Barcelona.
I see Aram has raised her hand. Is there something?
Yeah, Aram?
No, nothing. I just clapped.
Oh,
Okay.
nice.
Okay, we will go for Barcelona case by Rafael Chavez Avila. Rafael, the floor is yours.
Hola, buenas tardes. Good afternoon. In Valencia, we are. Buenas tardes. Son las 7 de la tarde. A ver.
So, good afternoon. It's 7 o'clock, 7 p.m. Can you hear me? Good afternoon. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to be at what is a global socio-economic forum, and I'm delighted to be able to share with you the findings of this study that we have been conducting over recent months. Of course, we cooperated with Unrest and GSEF on this particular study. I'd like to also give thanks to Mr. Il Jung for leading this project and this study, but not only this project, but other projects that he is driving that I think are extremely relevant, particularly in this case, advocating for greater scientific, academic, and intellectual work so that we can help to develop the social and solidarity economy internationally. So congratulations and thanks to you and to everybody in the team, Samuel, and many others. So here from Valencia and from our organization, we've been working for many years on the social economy. It's certainly not new for us. In fact, 2.5 years ago, we published a study for European Committee on Good Practices and Policies for the Development of Social Economy and Enterprises in Europe and the prospects thereof. So I think certainly it was very useful for us to be able to participate on that particular study. I'd also like to point out that since the financial crisis of between 2008 and 2013, we have moved towards a new context in terms of developing the social and solidarity economy. We do talk a great deal of the fact that we now have a new generation of policies to promote SSE. So in Barcelona, it's certainly not new for us. We have a long background in Barcelona, but also in many other countries too. Not in all countries, but in many countries, both nationally, regionally, and at city level in Spain. This is also the case. For example, if you take a look at our constitution, this is from 1978, and it talks about the development of social enterprises. And then from 1980, we had the very first policies to help develop the social economy. But in specific terms, it was in 2015 when we saw a change that led us to this new generation of policies to promote SSE regionally, but also locally. We must bear in mind the fact that Spain did suffer greatly from the last financial crisis, and it was one of the countries that had to apply very harsh austerity policies in the years following on from 2011. Between 2011 and 2014, we had at that time a very conservative government nationally, but also in many regions. But then in 2015, there was a trigger, a catalyst. And this was a change in politics, regionally, nationally, but also at municipal level. And many new progressive governments were voted in. This was the case in Barcelona, Madrid, Valencia, many other cities too in Spain. New political parties were formed as well. And these new political parties incorporated in their political manifestos issues related to the social and solidarity economy. This was the case and is the case, as we will see, of the city of Barcelona. So we had these municipalities like Barcelona, and it was precisely these councils, town councils, that led in the introduction of these new policies. And I think this new generation is very different to the first generation from the past. In fact, in our case study, we did look at this in closer detail. So if we look at the case of Barcelona, which is what we study in our particular case study for this project. And I think that the case of Barcelona is very relevant for various different reasons. Firstly, because there was a very successful introduction of these policies. They looked at the errors made by Madrid or Valencia, for example, and these same mistakes were not made in Barcelona. So if we look at Barcelona, the municipal government was very decisive and determined in its approach. And the way that it introduced these new policies took a very close look at the idea of policies that transform in the social and solidarity economy. So what this new generation of policies does actually brings a proper focus on this new way of making policy. So let's take a look at our methodology in the development of this case study. Well, first and foremost, we like working in partnership when we conduct our studies. So we looked for professional colleagues, political representatives from the city of Barcelona. In fact, I went to my friend, Jordi Villa, who is an intellectual leader who has driven this new kind of policy in Barcelona. He was the commissioner for the social and solidarity economy for the Barcelona Town Council. And he's a very important promoter for this. And we also worked with another colleague, Jordi, as well, who is an activist. And he has continued to develop the various different strands of the social and solidarity economy. So it's been very easy to work with these two colleagues. It wasn't just the university that conducted the research, but we brought in these very important local political stakeholders. And I think it's very important for us to get first-hand knowledge by talking to people, but also we had to do a literature review. But I think it's very important also that we also involve the policymakers of the city. So we created two focus groups. First focus group with policymakers, on which we included the current commissioner for social and solidarity economy for the Council of Barcelona, but also the leaders of the SSE movement in the city of Barcelona. So I think this has led to a very fruitful conversation. Now, sadly, because of the scope of the report, we haven't been able to include all of their remarks, but it was very fruitful for all. So this report that we have now finished is available in English and in Spanish. And these are available through the website of this project. We obviously wanted to publish in English, but we wanted to publish in Spanish too. So let's take a quick look now at the content of the PIESS, which is the policy to stimulate SSE in Barcelona. Well, it came about after the recent municipal elections. The new mayor that was voted in, Ada Colau, and a new political party, a progressive political party. This was the new context in 2015. Therefore, our new mayor showed this will to change things, and she appointed Jordi Villa as the commissioner for social and solidarity economy to bring in new policies that did not exist in Barcelona before this. So this is very important. not just the fact that this was a person from their political party, but it was a person who had been an activist in SSE in Barcelona. Therefore, he had participated in much of policy making in the past. He knew a lot of people and knew how things worked. But another important aspect was that the local government actually invested in SSE. In fact, they dedicated.
Could you wrap up your presentation in 2 minutes, please?
Only 2 minutes? Okay, so the relevant idea is that the budgetary allocation was increased by 800% only over the course of 3 years. And it's also very important to bear in mind that, and this is something that was not seen in different plans, was the fact that the process of debate and discussing new policies was carried out in a very short period of time. So it was not a protracted process bringing in all the different sectors and stakeholders, but the approach is more pragmatic. A short period of time was assigned so that they could develop these policies. It was set down in a short-term plan, a 4-year plan with specific objectives, specific areas of action, 50 different areas of action, various different bodies assigned to their tasks, and the end implementation of the plan. So this is all designed meticulously, which helped with the implementation of the plan. And I only have 1 minute left. And I would perhaps like to conclude by saying that the important fact is that we're going to comply with 4 of the key factors that we want to comply with. First of all, that it is cross-cutting across the social and solidarity economy. So this means that we're not only talking about cooperatives or organizations. No, we have to have a wider vision that includes the entire social and solidarity economy. Secondly, that it needed to be participatory. We need to have a co-construction policy of policies. We need to bring in political stakeholders and members of social sector as well. And then third is that the plan needs to be transportive. We don't want to have a palliative approach, but we want to actually catalyze the creation of new policies, new processes, new instruments that can bring about change in the city, satisfying everybody's demands. And finally, and I will conclude on this point, the 4th point is that we don't want to have a sectoral approach. We don't want this a policy set aside in a ghetto or a silo-based system, but that it will be able to be intertwined with other policy areas and sectors. So we want to mainstream SSE. Obviously, there have been certain barriers to the introduction of new policy, but we have finally implemented it in the beginning of this year, and we have been successful so far. I apologize for running over my time.
Thank you very much, Rafael. I think we got some hints about the answers to those questions raised in the first half. Okay, let's go for Montreal case presented by Professor Margie Mendel. Margie, we have a pre-recorded presentation, right? So
that's correct.
Here's Margie's presentation.
Good afternoon, good evening.
Oops, sorry.
My name is Margie Mendel, and I will be joined by my colleague and co-author Nancy Nintan to discuss with you public policies enabling the social and solidarity economy in the city of Montreal, part of a UNRIS project promoting the social and solidarity economy through public policies, guidelines for local governments. Next, please. Our paper covers a period beginning from 2013 to 2019. 2013 marks the year that the Quebec Social Economy Law framework legislation was adopted. But in fact, the social and solidarity economy and all public policies that have enabled it
are rooted in a process that was initiated by civil society in the mid-1980s. It's important to provide a context for our paper because municipal government in Canada is embedded in a Canadian political system and in division of powers, which severely limits the autonomy of municipalities to enact their autonomous policies. Canadian cities are creatures of provincial governments with limited revenues and increasing responsibilities. So in that context, provincial and federal policy interventions have been key to the development of the social and solidarity economy in Montreal, and they have been at the source of most strategic public policy measures. Like many other cities, I would say most other cities around the world, devolution of responsibility to city governments is on the rise, along with policy measures to increase their autonomy. Next. Montreal is further divided into numerous boroughs or districts, each of which have their own action plans and priorities, some giving more priority to the social and solidarity economy than others. Overarching policy measures are set by the city administration. Nancy will outline some of these after me. Recent measures by the provincial government are increasing the autonomy of the city of Montreal, and we should say these are very, very recent. So to sum up, there are 3 predominant trends. In fact, I see I've put 4. There are 4 predominant trends. There's a constitutional division of powers, which limits the autonomy of municipal governments, collaboration between 3 levels of government, mostly 2, the province and municipalities. 3, there is a loosening of rigid divisions by introducing new legislation, giving more power to the city. And 4, there is also action at the level of boroughs. But we must underscore that within this complex context, the social and solidarity economy is in Montreal rooted in social dialogue, co-construction, and collaborative processes that have been key to the building of its social economy. Policy initiatives have responded to social and solidarity economy collective action on the ground. Next, please. What distinguishes our social and solidarity economy in Quebec and in Montreal is the application of an integrated ecosystemic approach. The entire social economy is embedded in a comprehensive and place-based approach to local development, which is beyond the aggregate of its numerous collective enterprises. The social and solidarity economy has created numerous enabling tools, some of which we have outlined here: finance, technical support and accompaniment, training, research, knowledge transfer, citizen mobilization, commercialization. So policy development has been consistently initiated by stakeholders based on the needs and aspirations that have been identified within communities, leading to processes of co-construction within and with all levels of government. So to summarize, the collaboration occurs horizontally across divisions within levels of government, be it provincial or federal. It also occurs vertically between different levels of government, municipal and provincial and federal, quite limited at the federal level. And just to reinforce and repeat, like other cities around the world, devolution of many responsibilities at the municipal level is on the rise, but too often this is not accompanied by the resources in order to fulfill those commitments. Nancy?
Yes, thank you, Margie. So I'll present very briefly some of the major policy initiatives that have impacted on the development of the social economy in Montreal. Obviously, there's a lot of documentation that people can look into if they want more detail. So it's a very brief overview. Because, as I said, you know, a lot of the policies come from the provincial government, but have a very strong impact within the city. As was mentioned, the Social Economy Act was a provincial initiative, but what it did was really put the social economy up there as an important axe for development, and has been integrated over many years in economic development policies within the Montreal city administration. In the period that we studied, and there's also some interesting developments in terms of new juridical structures, particularly around social utility trusts that are now being experimented in Montreal. There was a provincial action plan to support entrepreneurship, which included collective entrepreneurship for the social economy. There has been developments in access to capital through investment tools. There has been access to resources for research and particularly for knowledge transfer, which has been very strategic, as transferring of social innovations in the social and solidarity economy has helped accelerate a lot of new strategies. And then this has been an ongoing for the past over 20 years. We've had policy measures at a provincial level in housing and home care, child care, recycling, food security, workplace integration. So there's many levels in which provincial and federal policies have had impact on the social economy within Montreal. Next. Municipally, there have nevertheless been a certain number of policy initiatives over the years, though it precedes the period that we studied. There was in 2009 a very innovative approach where rather than developing a municipal policy on the social economy, a choice was made to sign a partnership between social economy actors and the city, recognizing that the social economy helped the city to achieve its goals and carry out its mandate, and in return the city administration could be supporting more and in more strategic ways the development of the social economy. So that was a partnership agreement that led to the creation of a social economy office, and ongoing sectoral policy initiatives have existed over the years in housing and culture and sports and recreation, food systems and so on. These are all things that are ongoing and continued during the period that we studied. There was a new plan, an action plan. This time we talked about social innovation, and social economy was integrated into that. But there's been an ongoing procurement initiative that has been trying to close the gap between social economy enterprises and buyers, investment in infrastructure, and support for emerging new sectors, new technology, micro transport. So there's a lot of initiatives that are emerging out of that. Next. So finally, what are the lessons that we can learn from the Montreal experience? Very briefly, we have seen that, as Margie Mendel's underlined, the importance of an integrated systemic approach to supporting the social economy that creates the conditions basically for communities to develop these collective initiatives and have the financial tools and technical resources and so on to develop them. These are relationships that have been based on partnerships and co-construction right from the beginning. There's been an importance of integrating the social economy, and this is more recent, into an overall vision of ecological and social transition in an urban setting. So that has been a very clear, a lot of the new thrusts for the social economy in Montreal are very much oriented towards these goals of transition. The strength and resilience of Montreal's social economy, again, is linked to its roots in citizen mobilization and alliances with social movement. For those who know a little bit about the social economy in Quebec, that has been really its key factor of strength, that all this has come from the bottom up, based on citizen mobilization and dialogue. And finally, perhaps one of the most encouraging strengths of the social economy in Montreal is a result of a lot of work that was done to talk to youth, to work with universities, students, and so on. And as we see that young people are very much attracted to the social economy because of its contribution to ecological and social transition and the transformation of the dominant economic model. And in this context, one of the lessons learned is the importance of involving in a very direct way and reaching out to young people because they bring a huge force to the movement. So I guess we will end on that and open up to questions in the period. Thank you very much, and good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to all.
Thank you very much, Nancy and Margie. And Nancy Nimtan and Margie Mendel are the co-authors of the Montreal case paper. Now we are going for African city case, Dakar, Senegal, by Malik Diop and Aminata Diop Sam. And we have pre-recorded presentation, right?
Bonjour. Je suis, oui, effectivement.
Good afternoon. I'm Malik Diop, the national coordinator of the Senegalese network of stakeholders and local authorities for SSE. So I'm going to talk about the experience of the town of Dakar in the design, implementation, evaluation of public policy for organizations and cooperatives of the social and solidarity economy in Dakar, a project that we're carrying out with UNRIST. First, the context of the study. On national level, the context is somewhat favorable to the development of the SSE ecosystem. Is an ever stronger political will, and this has been seen in the creation of an SSE ministry in 2017. There is also now a legal framework that is being developed through a process of drawing up a sectoral policy brief and also a framework law for SSE, which will help us better organize governance within the sector. The next point is that there is a dense network of socioeconomic initiatives which needs to be supported at a local level. And finally, there is now an international and national movement in favor of the promotion of this sector. So let's now look at the process of support for SSE. Now, since 1990, the town of Dakar has initiated more than 10 major isolated or standalone projects, but there's no coherence or defined political strategy. And we needed a development plan that was designed, implemented, and assessed through the different phases of design. And this would have involved all of the relevant stakeholders and interactions with the government, the central government. And this was lacking. However, all of these different projects that have been developed, that we have experienced, I think can lay the foundations for an SSE policy in our city. And this process has created certain constraints or limits in giving support to the social and solidarity economy. The first limit is a lack of coordination, of promotion, and a lack of visibility. There's no coherent and planned policy for SSE. I think the second limit is that there's a weakness in legislative provisions and regulatory provisions for SSE. Next failing is that there's a deficit in human resources for the support process for SSE. And fourthly, is that there is a failing, a lack of financing and support mechanisms for projects of the social and solidarity economy. Now, we need to look at decision-making. Now, we need to look at this on two levels. Nationally, first, the Ministry for the social and solidarity economy is now putting in place two decision-making tools. The first is sectoral aid. So this would include a policy to promote microfinance, and this would generally cover the larger areas of the SSE. The second tool is a framework law. This would give structure to and organize the sector. These are two very important tools to aid with the decision-making process. At the level of the town, there are three levels that is going to be broken down into. First level is political and legal, with the organization of budgetary allocations through a provision of the Code of the Local Authorities. This would give structure to the planning of the process, and it would make the process as participatory as possible. Second level is strategy. The town already has a sustainable development planning department. This body is now assisting in the bottom-up planning processes for the organizations of the social and solidarity economy within our town. And finally, is the operational scale. Now in Dakar, there are several different structures, including the Department for Health Care and Social Aid. We have the Municipal Development Fund, we have SEBEN, we have the Credit Mutuel, we have the Habitat Cooperative, and so on and so forth. There are many different bodies in our town. And these are many different structures. And the fact is that this multiplicity of structures that is now taking up the reins of the social and solidarity economy is not actually going to help a local planned system and process. So I believe that the town would gain if we clarified and restructured the process better through one single roof, if we had one decision-making department that could be in charge of SSE policies. Now we need to look at the participatory mechanisms. First of all, we have the Advisory Council of the town of Dakar. This is a participatory management tool that was established on the 8th of September 2009. It has brought together all the various different stakeholders and it issues opinions after a consultation process. Second mechanism is the Steering and Selection Committee for SSE projects. It's an open process that allows all the various different stakeholders to see what's happening, to have a transparent overview of these systems. And this works with FODEM, the Municipal Fund, the Credit Mutuel, and all the various different organizations. It's an open process that brings everybody together. And finally, we have the public information workshops. This is a space for exchange, for bottom-up planning. Now we should take a look at the legal framework. Now, there are many different legal forms that cut across the field of social and solidarity economy in Dakar. First of all, we need to break them down into different families of stakeholders. First, we have collective enterprises. So we're talking about cooperatives, mutual companies, foundations, and economic interest groups. These are related more to the primary sector, so agriculture, crafts, fishing. And I think also this affects youth. I think it's very important that we provide these particular people with a lever so that they can have their voices heard. The second family of stakeholders is social enterprises. We're talking about associations, local grassroots community organizations, social purpose incubators, environmental incubators, and social enterprises. So it's a very wide range of different organizations, social enterprises that can work together and do form a very large part of our economic system. And then the third family of stakeholders are the support structures. So we're talking about NGOs, federations, incubators for social enterprises, public and private initiative, and funds dedicated to SSE. Now, in Dakar, we've also set up structures specifically wherein people can sit down at the table together and think about better structuring SSE in our town. So what about support to organizations? Now, we need to look at this on two different levels. First of all, nationally, the government has put in place several different financing mechanisms. There's a whole wide range of different financing and support mechanisms that help women, help different groups of stakeholders. We also help the rural world through the National Association for Rural Workers, but also people involved in crafts and so on and so forth. So this is a support structure nationally. Then if we look at it locally, it replicates the national level. But what we have now in town are decentralized structures for support. We have a support fund, and we also have simplified eligibility rules to strengthen capacities. And we do this through a three-prong approach. I think this is very important. The three-prong approach is training, funding, and support or mentoring. I think this is how we can better strengthen the SSE in our country. What about access to the market and to funding? Now, first of all, I think that we should lament the fact that there is a lack of encouraging or incentive frameworks to help in the public procurement process. And there are many different financial structures, but in general, they are very little adapted to the realities of SSE organizations. So we have banks, we have microfinance institutions, we have national promotion agencies to help funding young people and women, also employment agencies. But all of these different organizations really are ill-suited to work with the demands of the social and solidarity economy. Next, we need to look at the collection of data and research. Now, first of all, there's no systematic approach to data collection, researching, and sharing knowledge on SSE. And these limits coming out, first of all, because there's a deficit in fully capitalizing on the experiences so far. Secondly, these limits are due to the weakness of statistical data in our town. So I'd like to conclude by giving you a few recommendations. First of all, we need to integrate SSE in regional policies. We need to do this through the drawing up and implementation of local SSE development strategies. Second recommendation, we need to coordinate projects and structures for support by having a central decision-making center. We need an SSE department that takes the entire sector under its wing. Third point, we need accompaniment. We need to set up municipal SSE hubs to work along the entire value chain. Final point, we need to strengthen mechanisms. We need to have solid hiring systems in place so that we can work properly with SSE organizations and social enterprises. We need to do this so that we can benefit the plans and programs across the town. So that is what we're doing in our city, and that is the content of our study. Thank you.
Thank you, Malik, for your wonderful presentation about Dakar case. And now we move on to Liverpool case by Professor Alan Sutton. We have pre-recorded presentation again.
We have a presentation, but not a pre-recorded one. So I would like to ask Alan to come in as I start the next slide. Thank you.
Yes, you can hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Sam. And good evening from Liverpool. My name is Alan Sutton. My co-authors on this report were Helen Heap and Matt Thompson. And I'm going to talk to you for the next 10 minutes about the social and solidarity economy in the Liverpool City region. Next slide, please, Sam. Liverpool City region is the administrative boundary for the greater Liverpool area, including its hinterlands, and the population stands about 1.6 million. This map provides you with an indication of the districts. As you can see, it's centred around the River Mersey, and its economy has been shaped by its maritime trade, not least the imperial character of the slave trade some centuries ago, which still has kind of impacts today. Such was the influence of the maritime trade that the boundaries that you can see were impacted by the wealthy and powerful merchants. The city region suffered economically from the 1970s right towards the end of the 20th century, when a great deal of restructuring took place, industrial restructuring took place, and many branch plants left Liverpool City region. It's currently at the centre of a COVID-19 public health crisis in the UK, and I'll mention how the SSE has responded to this a little later. Nevertheless, hospitality, retail has been hit very, very hard in the current crisis, and these were some of the growth areas in the recent economy. Next slide, please, Sam. The national framework, the United Kingdom framework for the SSE, is a complex one, and its relationship with the local city region has many difficulties, some similar to what we heard earlier on in Montreal in terms of the different scales of governance. Nevertheless, national legislation has been aimed mainly at the for-profit sector in terms of business development. We have no legal form for the social solidarity economy, no legal form for social enterprise. General business legislation has been around company law, and there's been a real ethos of deregulation, which has produced really a focus on market ideals for an emergent social enterprise sector. We have had some legislation which is specific for the SSE. The introduction of community interest companies was one. Community interest companies are trading social enterprises with an asset lock, excuse me. And in terms of cooperatives, we've had the introduction of what we call BENCOMs, Benefit Community Cooperatives, which has really widened the purpose of cooperatives from benefit of only membership to the wider community. How this is impacting on things like democratic accountability in the economy is an interesting question. And we've also had changes to forms of charities with the introduction of the Charitable Incorporated Organisation. And basically what that did was simplify some of the administration for charities. And we see that there's a rise in CIOs and community interest companies in the later years. Another significant piece of legislation was the Public Services Social Value Act of 2012, and that introduced to public agencies the idea of social impact. And as we've seen earlier, it's sought to encourage procurement, and as there's an estimated £250 billion per annum spent on public services in the UK. So it's brought a greater focus to economic, social and environmental value, but it's still very limited. In the Liverpool City region, around about 25% of GVA is attributable to the public sector expenditure. So we can see there's potential there. Another piece of national legislation of recent importance is Devolved Governance. The four nations, Wales, England, Northern Ireland and Scotland, have seen their support for the SSE slightly differ as that devolved governance has taken place. City region governance has been embedded in England, and we see devolved local authorities, combined authorities, I should say, and Liverpool City region is one of those with a metro mayor, and that's given us opportunities to develop the SSE too. Next slide, please. The history of the SSE in Liverpool City region is an interesting one. It consists of philanthropy associated with the trade of the maritime sector, charitable trusts, cooperativism, mutualism, and some syndicalist trade unionism as well. In the latter part of the 20th century, community development and housing cooperatives took a turn, particularly as there was increasing tension between Liverpool City Council and the then Margaret Thatcher government, and not always with the housing cooperative sector, community sectors consistent with either local government or central government. Also, towards the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, the city region qualified for high levels of EU funding through the Objective 1 programme, and that supported the developing social enterprise sector. They were able to work in sectors such as training and education and stimulating other forms of entrepreneurship as well. Post-2010, there's really been an austerity-driven response from the SSE, with some return to the radical politics that we see towards the end of the 20th century, but with a distinct entrepreneurial flavour. Our work from 2006 showed there were 1,400 trading organisations in Liverpool City Region SSE, organisations that traded for a strong social purpose. There was 45,000 employees associated with these organisations, generating £3 billion of revenue per annum with a £4 billion asset base. The point to make is it was really significant within the wider local economy, and until this hadn't been recognised. But there's persistent poverty, and the response from the SSE has been important. Next slide, please.
Alan, you have 2 minutes to wrap up.
Okay, we see the concentration of the social and solidarity economy with this map, and the real thing I want to draw from this is the concentration of these organisations where where poverty reigns. And I'll come back to that in any questions. Next slide, please. What do we do to develop the city region solidarity economy? Well, we need to exploit national policy where we can and the devolution of governance. But we need to make sure policy meets the needs of the SSE, and this hasn't been the case previously. Next slide, please. We need initiatives that are coordinated and connected and joined up, and they've got to be co-owned really by the social solidarity economy plus the public and private sectors. We can increase aggregate demand by using the procurement policies from the Social Value Act. But we need to expand on this, and we shouldn't see the SSE as simply subservient to the public sector. And we need to engage in those private markets too. We should use our devolved governance to establish a stronger voice for the SSE, and we've done this now with the setting up of the SSE reference panel and embedding the local industrial strategy, the social economy. Next slide, please. We need to organise the SSE better. We need stronger support agencies within the sector, greater levels of democracy and accountability, and greater levels of diversity. We see the shoots of this, and there's been some history that's always provided, for example, strong support for BAME communities, but we need to do more. We also need to get better forms of finance into the social and solidarity economy, and we've started to do this, and my colleague is going to report on this later on in the conference. Co-production, knowledge, policy, they will raise awareness of the SSE, and this is essential. Next slide, please. Dealing with the crisis, very, very briefly, the SSE responded really early to the crisis, the COVID crisis in March 2020. It was mobilised to support communities. That poverty and place link was really important in exploiting that. But there's financial difficulties. Community funds were initiated and support for social enterprise provided, again co-produced with the combined authority and the sector. The current phase of crisis is really exposing the weaknesses of our devolution arrangements, with much disagreement between the city region and national government, and this is threatening our achievements in recent years. To build back, we'll need more resources, planning, and more co-production. I'll finish there, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. Thank you very much for your presentation touching upon this COVID-19 crisis situation and its impact on SSE policies as well, because there was a question about the influence of COVID-19 on SSE policies. And there are other questions as well. SSE policies to the democratization, the SSE policies contribution to the democratization of the economic policy, and impact of accountability and transparency on the SSE policy. So I will open the floor, and if you have any questions and comments, please raise your hand or write down in chat window. And while you are writing your questions and comments, maybe I will ask all the presenters about these questions. I mean, you can choose and answer the questions like influence of COVID-19 in your local areas on SSE policies, and the SSE policies contribution to the democratization of economic policies in local areas. Maybe we can begin with Margie. And Nancy?
Just a minute.
Okay.
Okay, so you want to go, Margie?
You have to unmute your microphone, Margie.
Okay. Well, I'll be brief so we can. There's interference. Somebody's mic should be turned off. Okay, that's better. Well, a direct impact of the COVID crisis is being felt on one sector in particular, not the only sector, but and that is home care. We had a huge travesty in seniors' residences with thousands of deaths. And the working conditions are appalling. There are negotiations currently underway with public sector workers, but it was so evident that having people in their own homes with home care would have saved a lot of lives. The social and solidarity economy is very present in home care. It was one of the first sectors, and I'll let Nancy continue on it because she was a leader in highlighting the importance of having collective enterprises in home care. So that's one example. The other would be on local food production and distribution, which is also increasing very rapidly, and the establishment of social economy enterprises. But let me just say one more word on the democratization of the economy or of economic policy, but it really is the democratization of the economy. The way in which the social and solidarity economy has developed in Quebec, throughout its evolution, has been a process of economic democratization. If you take the basic commodities, I'm drawing here on the work of Carl Polanyi, but if you take the very basic commodities of land, labor, and money, labor, the formation of worker cooperatives and the formation of nonprofit enterprises in the social economy with quality employment and sustainable employment, issues of gender and race and so on being at the core of dignified and decent work. On the question of land, we have many community land trusts that are mostly in rural Quebec, but increasingly social utility trusts are being examined in the city. And on the question of money, Quebec was a leader, has been a leader in social finance, in developing social finance tools that operate on a very different basis than mainstream banking or venture capital. And just to end on that, I participate quite actively in the social finance sector. And almost immediately after the COVID crisis broke out, the institutions in social finance banded together to create conditions of flexibility on repayment terms and so on, and risk calculations, and to work with social economy enterprises to really prevent the crisis from being broadly felt by these businesses. So these are just examples, and we can go into the digital economy and how that is also being democratized through the consideration of developing platform cooperatives and so on. So these are all processes, if you will, of decommodification, where the market is embedded in society rather than the driver. So these are all processes of economic democratization. Nancy, you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, just quickly, around the COVID crisis, I think that, as Margie mentioned, the response and the role and the importance of social economy enterprises in several basic sectors to respond to basic needs in housing, in food, in home care, and so on, has been really clear there. But there has been one perverse impact to a certain extent on some of the business models, because there's for example, in food, is to go rapidly back into the charitable perspective of giving food, whereas we've been building these models of shared costs, of social tarification, to have a sustainable cost sharing kind of approach. But I think that where the impact of the COVID crisis, and the jury is out, because we don't know whether we're going to succeed or not, and it's true, and it's been mentioned by others, is that things that we've been saying for years about the importance of these kinds of, service, and sector, and this kind of employment in some kind of a cohesion of our society. The fact that the economy doesn't run everything, we have to actually shut down the economy for the health and to save people's lives. A lot of things about local buying, local purchasing, all those kinds of things that were part of the discourse or part of the vision of the social economy have risen. And so there's an issue now of whether we can make sure that those kinds of realizations of, are going to be able to become, embedded in future policies in terms of recovery. And that's where the social economy actors are working very hard on making all kinds of proposals of how to work based on that kind of other economic logic. But again, we will see how that works itself out in the next while. But
Thank you very much.
Seems to be very long. Well, social economy always grows in crisis periods. I'll stop there. So,
thank you very much. Malik, do you have anything to make comments? Malik?
Oui, je voudrais juste, je pense, ajouter dans la même veine parce que les contextes un peu changent.
Yes, the context changes, and that means that people adapt accordingly and they work more on a local level. And that's what we're seeing in Senegal. Here, people had to face lockdown, of course, and that meant that the normal forms of operations were not possible. People could not go out, and so in order to respond, we needed to. We found that local actors no longer had the legal means to act or to change things, and so work had to be done at a central level. Central government had to bring in a decree in order to reorder the way things work at a territorial level so that the actors could operate and so that work could be done with local organizations to address the issues of food, ensuring that those who are the most in need have their needs addressed. So health teams were set up to fight COVID at a local level. And so what we saw is that the government, the democratic functioning of the government was not previously appropriate and had to be changed. And this meant that we had to bring in administrative reforms to see how we could bring back democracy at a local level so as to provide responsibilities to access to public markets, access to food at a local level, and also looking at how local authorities and local bodies can reorganize themselves so that they can look at ensuring a local market, producing more, ensuring local produce, local short-circuit markets. So it was looking at democracy in a different way at a local level. That is really what brought about change. That really brought about changes. So it was local elected officials working with central government, trying to raise awareness on the need for a paradigm shift and giving much more democratic power or economic power to local actors so that they can address crises, the health crisis, the food crisis, the social crisis, the economic crisis as well. So I believe that these were fundamental aspects in the COVID crisis, and it was really about democratic governance. Thank you.
And Lampaya Amidi, could you briefly comment on one of these questions, whether it is about COVID-19 or accountability and transparency or democratization of economic policies or economy?
Sí, muchas gracias, señor Ilchum. Bueno, yo estaré en la misma línea.
Thank you very much. So I would echo a lot of what has been said by our colleagues regarding the crisis, and maybe I can speak briefly from the Spanish perspective. Spain is a country that has been and continues to be severely affected by the crisis, and the COVID-19 crisis had a severe impact, above all, on care, on the elderly and care homes, as we've heard from other colleagues. And SSE, what has happened is that cooperatives have responded, at least in Spain, in Valencia and in Catalonia, at least they have responded very well. They've provided responses to the health emergencies that have arisen. So one example is that in Spain, in mid-March, we did not have face masks. So we found ourselves in a situation of extreme emergency. One of the main bodies that tried to provide masks was the Mondragon group that bought machinery to be able to supply, to be able to make face masks and supply them. But it was really agricultural cooperatives, consumer cooperatives throughout the whole of the crisis. They were all exemplary in this period. They really behaved, they operated very well. We have studies in Spain that reveal that the impact of the crisis was lower. This always happens. We find that the impact of COVID was lower than in normal conventional companies. So the need for layoffs was much lower than in other companies. And this shows that cooperatives are resilient in this type of situation. And we must underscore that the crisis also represents a new opportunity for changing our model. And the same happened with the previous crisis. So when social devastation occurs, when economic devastation occurs, that is a tremendous opportunity, a huge opportunity to change the model and public policy as well. Furthermore, in Europe, at this moment in time, this is what we are looking at in 2020. 2020 is the year when the European Commission has brought about changes, and they're changing policies for the next few years. So they're looking at deep-rooted issues such as the ecological transition, digitalization, and resilience. These are three axes where the social economy is very well positioned. We are already very well positioned in these areas. And now in Barbecho, they're developing a European plan for the social economy at a European level. And we hope that this will include all of these dimensions I've mentioned. So this is a time of great opportunity to deploy this type of new policy to encourage a social economy. In Spain, this has already been done. In July, the Spanish government approved the recovery plan. And in this plan, the role set aside for the social economy is significant. And the Valencian local authorities have done that as well. In Barcelona, also, we saw that social movements responded immediately to the crisis, above all those who are behind the social and solidarity economy, and they demanded an economy for our lives, so an economy focused on our lives. So looking at a way of changing policy at a regional level in Catalonia in the right direction. So it's not just how they have responded, but they have also offered significant proposals in terms of what the social economy can offer. And I believe that this is very important to stress today. Thank you.
I think we've been through 7 different contexts of different cities, but UCLG has more than 200 city cases and local government cases, I guess. And I'd like to hear some views from Sarah, overseeing all those different cases of their members in responding to this COVID-19 crisis and the relationship between SSE and democratization of economy or economic policies and influence or impact of accountability and transparency issues on SSE. I mean, do you have anything to add to what has been said by our presenters? Sarah?
Yes. Thank you very much. Voy a hablar en español, que estamos en México.
So I'm in Mexico now, so I'll speak Spanish. So I think that what we have heard what we've heard from the other researchers is very inspiring, and just now we heard it from Malik, and we find that they're finding new paths ahead which were completely unexpected before. So a need for local government, a need for neighborhood, a need for working with your neighbors, having a neighborly vision. And then in a crisis, either everybody knuckles down with social values or will be ruined. So I think this is at a global level, we're seeing the need for local government, local authorities, and this has been underscored in several of the presentations already. And this really confirms what we heard from Barcelona and Valencia. That really stresses the need for local government, and those affected by the crisis have been helped immensely, above all in terms of their mental health, because support has been provided in their immediate surrounding areas, and this has meant that many people are now looking for a more local economy, a more circular economy, an economy more nearby, near to their homes, but above all, a much greater solidarity in the economy. So when thinking about the COVID issue, I just wanted to share the inspiration that we heard, that despite the emergency that we're in, progress can be made. And 60% of local governments in our area are connected to us, whether it be in large cities or smaller or medium-sized areas. And all of these have spoken about a need to act immediately, a need to act very quickly. So on the one hand, they have been able to solve the problems of their citizens, and they've been able to provide solidarity and public services. I think public services, that's something that we have heard in almost all of the presentations. So really, it's about strengthening the discourse around public policy, but above all, providing public services, because never before had there been such a need. There was never such a difference between public healthcare and private healthcare. Now we really do see the difference between the two and the need for changing the focus. So these are priorities for us to follow, and we find that many different priorities have been coming together. The future that we see now, the paths ahead for local government, the needs for local government, this is where we can see it's really one of the levels of government which can really solve the problems in a holistic, comprehensive way. And this future is more a solidarity future, but it is as a future of more care. It's a future of a more circular approach. It's also being more alert and listening to science, and also paying attention to the climate. So for us and this gathering here today, I'd like to put an open question to you all. How can we connect these social and solidarity economies to those other priorities, the other agendas that people have? And in this way, we can be stronger, we can have greater strength, because there's no doubt that all of what we're living in our cities is great progress. And we've heard that you learn, it's one step after another, you learn the different steps. But really, this is great, because the social and solidarity economy, as we have heard, we've heard that we've got a lot of participation from the private sector. We've also got NGOs coming on board. We've also got foundations. And this is a great strength. And from the perspective of local governments, this can really be an entrance point for public policy. Government is not necessarily a financing agent of all of the initiatives that are based on solidarity. Sometimes local governments are just an agent that brings people together rather than providing financing, or as well as providing financing. So we need to show the strength of how we can link the different elements together. So as Rafael, we've got Mondragon, that's a very good example in Spain. But how can we work at the level of local governments to look at how our economy can be in the future. The intention really has to be one of creating a sustainable economy, and we know that a lot of work needs to be done, but really it's local governments often have limitations, they have restrictions, and it's not just that you can simply say, let's have more inclusion, more solidarity, more support, more rights. You can't necessarily say that immediately. The strongest anchor point is in partnerships, in bringing together the different elements, joining them up. And
Okay.
I think this is something that we could stress to a greater degree, and in this way we can be stronger. And one final point which I'd like to raise is that here I heard Malik speaking about youth, young people, but there was not much of a differentiation really between. Well, there wasn't a stress on the separate role that women play, the unique role that women play, and I think that should be stressed to a greater degree, because when you look at what happens in practice in the response to the crisis, you can see once again that the role of women is a very strong one. We can see women leading many of the initiatives, and I think that's not necessarily to be taken for granted. It's something that we should stress and highlight. So from our side, what I can say is that the GSEF has been helping to provide articulation, and I think this will continue happening as we move forward. And we're at the beginning of a very interesting process. We don't have much time. What we really have to do is to ensure that the new economy is a broad response
Thank you very
to the
much.
crisis.
I think the integration of SSE into broad framework of development at the local level and national level has been extremely important point for every actor in SSE community. And I think that has been emphasized in our guidelines as well, in terms of policy tools and institutions. So I think we are closing to that guideline presentation, but we need a toilet break. So I will give you 5 minutes, and I strongly recommend you to go to toilet and come back with your lunch, dinner, or night snack, depending on where you are. Because in Geneva, it is almost 8 o'clock, or no, 7:08, and it's very early in the morning in Korea, and in Latin America, it must be kind of lunchtime. So I will give you 5 minutes to get to address these two issues, toilet and food. Okay, we will resume in 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone. I asked you to bring your food with you, and Margie brought her computer to the kitchen. I brought my banana and potato here. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. I mean, we still have almost same number of people attending this conference at the beginning. I think it shows the kind of importance of this discussion for everybody. And now we enter the last session, discussing guidelines for local governments. You know, all those 7 case studies became the basis of these guidelines because we gathered information and knowledge lessons from those 7 case studies and other literature to make these guidelines. And we talked about all those important issues in policies like legal framework, co-production process or co-construction process, capacity building, development planning, and all those elements are in these guidelines. So we will go for this guideline presentation by Hamish Jenkins, my colleague in our team. And Samuel, could you play pre-recorded presentation of Hamish? Hello.
Hello, friends, colleagues. and partners from all over the world. It's my honor to present a research project that UNRIST has undertaken with the help of GSEF. My name is Hamish Jenkins. I'm a consultant for this project, which has lasted about a year to bring all these elements together for guidelines on the promotion of public policies for SSE. And it is my honor to present the initial findings of this research, which is aimed really to provide practical guidance to policymakers, primarily at the local level. So the aim of these guidelines is, as I said, to provide practical guidance to policymakers, primarily at the subnational level, to develop and consolidate public policies to enable actors within the social and solidarity economy to establish themselves, grow, and prosper for the common good within their respective territory. Why did we undertake this endeavor? One of the strategic reasons is that SSE is a means of implementation of the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, which applies to all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that were adopted during the 2015 UN Sustainable Development Summit. This has to be placed within a broader context that there are political difficulties of long-standing macroeconomic transformations that are needed to realize the 2015 agenda. But regardless of whether or when they can be achieved, it is imperative that they be complemented by what one can describe as a bottom-up process of socioeconomic and political transformation at the local level to meet these objectives. And the social and solidarity economy can be a key vehicle towards this end. So what is the social and solidarity economy, SSE? Well, in fact, there is no uniform definition of SSE, in part because of its diversity of actors and territorial experiences. For the purposes of this presentation and of this publication, the following definition is used, which is contained in these draft guidelines, and it follows as such. SSE encompasses organizations and enterprises with social and often environmental objectives, guided by principles and practices of cooperation, solidarity, and democratic self-management, where decision-making power is not, and we insist on this point, is not linked to the weight of held capital. This is the great difference with the conventional economic model. Organizations, relations, and activities that adhere to these distinctive principles are greatly varied. Existing laws on SSE in its various forms apply to a wide range of organizations and enterprises, and these can include cooperatives, non-profit organizations, associations engaged in economic activity, mutuals, which are often formed to organize finance-related activities, foundations, and enterprises which prioritize social and environmental goals well over profit. One of the great stepping stones towards this agenda was the formation of the United Nations Task Force on SSE, which Il Chong has already alluded to in his previous presentation. And it's worth just reminding everyone that a wide coalition of United Nations organizations, plurilateral bodies such as the European Commission, the OECD, and a wide diversity of global SSE civil society networks got together and joined forces to advocate for the SSE as an essential transformational agenda to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Once we have managed to establish SSE as a global agenda for the transformation of economic systems, one needs to move to a practical, concrete agenda in order to scale up SSE. And in this context, UNRIST, with the financial support and guidance of GSEF, spent about a year to produce a comprehensive set of public policy guidelines to advance the SSE agenda. For readers, these guidelines, for local governments primarily, are intended to foster a clearer understanding of the major principles, values, organizational features, and transformative potentials of SSE. The target readers include not only government officials, but also SSE practitioners, of course, scholars, and other stakeholders with an interest in promoting SSE through public policies and institutions, particularly in the local context. In this primary version, open for consultation during the October virtual GSEF forum, the guidelines cover the following 9 complementary public policy angles that need to be ideally advanced in concert to genuinely scale up and sustain local SSE ecosystems, which is an expression that describes a range of institutions that work in parallel, organizations, networks, and of course government organizations that take into account the diverse socioeconomic, political, and cultural contexts within their territories. They are detailed in distinct chapters in this publication as follows. So the chapters are organized in the following order. In the first instance, co-construction for public policy for SSE is absolutely essential. And this publication provides guidance on how to establish and manage diverse processes and a wide range of mechanisms and approaches to co-construction of public policies and plans between government and SSE actors. The second chapter focuses on another essential element, which is legal frameworks for SSE. This introduces various legal institutions that regulate and support SSE at international, supranational, national, but essentially subnational, meaning regional, provincial, and municipal levels, and explains different pathways to creating them. The third chapter looks at the issue of mainstreaming SSE in development plans, meaning the overall framework within which different institutions, financial institutions, and so forth can operate to actually vitalize this movement. This explains how to incorporate SSE in development and programs that different levels of government can establish SSE-specific development plans and programs. The fourth chapter looks at supporting organizations for SSE. This demonstrates different trajectories of development of supporting organizations for SSE, and these can include government organizations with specific mandates to support SSE, intermediary organizations engaged in co-construction of policies and their implementation, as well as SSE networks and associations working across the jurisdictions of cities, regions, and provinces. The fifth chapter focuses on capacity building for SSE. This introduces and explains several public policies and institutions for capacity building and training services on management, governments, and other functions to empower and enable social and solidarity enterprises and organizations to become more efficient and sustainable in the market economy and more relevant and impactful for their communities. The sixth element is access to finance, which is also extremely central. And this chapter illustrates various public policy measures to facilitate the access of SSE to both public and private finance for different stages of SSE development, including social and solidarity finance, private and public loans, state subsidies and grants, private donations, and more innovative instruments such as social impact bonds and complementary currencies. Seventh chapter is on access to markets for SSE. This chapter explains the series of processes such as purchase, supply, and consumption of SSE goods and services in both public and private markets, and outlines the ways in which one can basically, from an SSE perspective, access both those types of markets, which are quite different, and which we detail in the chapter in question. On the 8th chapter, we look at one area that is quite crucial, which is SSE communication, a communication strategy which outlines various public policies for awareness raising, campaigns, advocacy strategies to inform individual and groups, to become aware of the value and the extraordinary potential of SSE, even though it is quite a challenge to communicate. The 9th chapter looks at mapping the social and solidarity economy as a whole, looking at a very diverse range of organizations and enterprises that often fall under the radar screen. So it is basically research and data collection for SSE and policy approaches on how to promote research, collection and data processing, and the transfer of knowledge and lessons on SSE. And on this front, one of the big difficulties is, of course, that many of the SSEOs are under the radar screen. They're often part of the informal sector, and therefore there is a need for very creative means to try and find ways in which to identify these organizations that are in the informal sector but play a vital role in the development of this overall movement. So each of these chapters are illustrated with examples drawn especially from the 7 case studies that were commissioned by UNRIST as an integral part of this project on SSE public policy experience of city and provincial governments from the following territories. Number 1, Barcelona, then Dakar, Durban, Liverpool, Mexico City, Seoul, Quebec and Montreal, and these were framed within the context of emerging policy analysis and academic research on SSE. So while the chapters are conceived to be read independently from each other, the topics are evidently all interconnected, and therefore every chapter has a guidance section with a flowchart of questions and answers which will guide respondents to relevant information that can be found in some of the other chapters. The questions are designed to draw out respondents' perceptions and complement this with strategic investigations of the context they are working in, so that they can establish what processes are needed to improve current policies and institutions for SSE, communicate with one another, document institutions and policies in question, and help them to plan their respective actions. That is the final chapter of this current publication. And to conclude, there are a range of cross-cutting themes that reappear across this draft document. And these include, number 1, the essential need for policy co-construction between the public sector and SSE actors to ensure that the policies developed correspond to the real needs and conditions on the ground. This process of continuous policy dialogue needs to be undertaken as an indispensable investment to avoid the risk of policy failure and consequent squandering of resources. Secondly, the essential need for long-term political continuity between policy cycles, as one would say, meaning if there's a change of government with a different political party that might terminate what was initiated by the previous government. And one of the ways is to achieve this through legal institutionalization, or as one would say, legal lock-in of SSE policy into laws that in some contexts, such as Brazil, can be undertaken at a subnational level and enable SSE policy to continue even if at the federal level the federal initiatives have been completely dismantled, but also aiming to try and get a buy-in on the socio-economic benefits of SSE across different political parties, meaning that SSE is an entrepreneurial spirit which can be embraced from all sides of the political spectrum. Thirdly, there is a challenge for subnational policymakers to know through which angle to integrate and mainstream SSE in wider sustainable development plans. And this varies enormously from one legal and constitutional context to another. In some cases, these can be undertaken autonomously at the subnational level, as in the case of Seoul in South Korea. In other more federally centered contexts, it requires coordination with the national government, and in the ideal situation, it would be through a cross-ministerial strategy to plug SSE in all the relative departments, whether health, agriculture, forestry, education, or other relevant sectors. It is a complicated process to navigate across a wide variety of jurisdictions, but this publication aims to help policymakers to navigate through these different options in function of their So to conclude, we need to look at various pathways to attempt to test the value of these recommendations in concrete terms. And for this, we have different institutional options to go forward. We have, of course, a project that's still underway within the UN task force on SSE to link ways in which one can promote SSE in concrete terms for the implementation of the SDG agenda. We have the UNDP local economic development program called UNDP Art, which has already shown great interest in integrating SSE as part of a local economic development strategy in various countries. We have the UCLG the United Cities and local governments that are committed now to also bring in SSE as part of their overall strategic framework, and GSEF, of course, which has training courses around the world within which these guidelines could be tested and integrated. And finally, we also have the OECD in cooperation with the European Commission, who are developing a major program to promote SSE within their budget.
Thank you very much, Hamish. First of all, I mean, you can have a look at this consultation document of guidelines. We provided link in the chat box, and there is a link in the website of UNRIST and GSEF as well. So I strongly encourage you to have a look at it and give us feedback on the draft consultation document, and we will incorporate those comments into final version of guidelines. And I can say with confidence that there is no single answer to policy questions. We cannot say you should do this, you should do that to deal with a specific question in your local areas. So these guidelines is not about what you should do to promote SSE in your local context. It is about the lessons, findings you can refer to when you are trying to establish policies and institutions to promote SSE in your local context. That means you have to adapt all those information and knowledge you can get from this guideline to your local context. So it is not enough to explain all these substance and important points of guidelines within 30 minutes. But I think Hamish was successfully describing all those important points and elements of guidelines. So let's have some comments from two invited policymakers at the local level. I'd like to call upon Maud Marquis-Bissonnette, the Madam Councillor, Gatineau City, Canada. First, floor is yours, Maud Marquis-Bissonnette.
Hello, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Great. Well, first, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm glad to be here again. I was in Bilbao 2 years ago, and I'm very glad to have those discussions with you again this year. The city of Gatineau is just about to officially adopt its social economy policy. In fact, it should be tomorrow at the Municipal Council, and we have worked in the recent months on this policy. We've been accompanied by Nancy Nimtam, who was earlier a panelist as well, and it was a great process. So I want to reflect on what has been discussed earlier and what has been documented in the research that I had the occasion to read before, and stress some points that were told today, but also that could resonate as Gatineau is about to adopt our policy. As for context, I feel like social economy is gaining more and more importance. Margie Mendel and Nancy discussed that earlier, but we have a situation in Canada, at least, but I believe it's across the world probably, where cities are gaining more and more importance. They are having more and more responsibilities, and resources are very limited. In that context, social economy has a role to play. Also, and it was mentioned clearly in the research, the widespread reduction of fiscal transfer to municipalities. I find it very accurate for us here. The role of, well, everything that is related to climate change and sustainable development, as well as fighting growing economic and social inequalities. I want to underline few principles of social economy. First one is subsidiarity. So making decision as close as the citizen as possible, equality and justice, sustainable development, as I mentioned. Also, I really like the expression, and it was the first time I was coming across it, people-centered from UNRISD, and also democratic power. And it might be something that we tend to forget, at least in my country, in Quebec, but we might sometimes underestimate the value of it, but it's really at the center of what we're doing. So if I try to answer the question how to transform the present and build a better future from the perspective of SSE, and trying to stress some few elements, of course we need enabling policies and the appropriate funding for it. What I find can be counterintuitive for public admin in general is that they have to let it go a bit with social economy. Public structure tend to have some path dependency, what we call path dependency. So just to reproduce the model that we already are using and just to do the same thing that we're used to do. And they're not always open to innovation, and social economy is innovation by definition. And it is the case for the process as much as the result. So this is a challenge and something that we have, I believe, to keep in mind. Also, the fact that social economy must be place-based policies. They must be decentralized as well. Many of the people present today mentioned the importance of the level of government working together to create enabling environment. That is part of it as well. But it should not be top down, but really much like bottom up when it's time to develop local policies to enable a social economy. And also policies must be comprehensive, and it challenges the administrative silos, and it's something that we have to address as well, but is also a bit counterintuitive for public administration. Something else, and I believe Nancy Nimtam will probably smile when I will say that, but I believe that it's important that political and administrative both sides have the will to go in that direction. And this is something we've been through with the city of Gatineau. But for the success of SSE policy, we need to make sure, and this is maybe something that I haven't seen in the research that could be added, if I might suggest, but there's something here, because sometimes what we see in Gatineau is there is a strong political will, but the administrative machine doesn't follow, maybe is not ready to follow as much. It's a change of culture for them because they need to let the power go to the community. And it's of course a challenge for public admin, I believe, in general. And there's the importance as well of what we've mentioned today about co-construction and collaborative process as well. And just one last element before I end up today, and this has been very evident in the chapter developed by, or the paper developed by the Barcelona team, but we need to have evidence-based policy, also data, and of course network of practitioners and experts are very helpful, I believe, for the success of social economy policies. And as a researcher, of course, I tend to believe in those things in general, but I find the occasion to discuss and to learn about other cases very useful when it comes to create policies and environment to consolidate the social economy. So I hope it's helpful, but thank you again.
Thank you very much. Especially you touched upon that issue of kind of built-in resistance in bureaucracy and administration. I think, we have some answers or lessons about those issues in our guideline in communication chapters or capacity building and all that. So maybe you can have a look at those chapters dealing with those cultural issues related to policy reform or policy revisions in local context. And I will move on to Ronald Nubuga Barimwezo, Mayor of Nakawa Division, Kampala City, Uganda. Ronald, are you with us still?
Yes, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Good morning, good evening. My name is Ronald Barimwezo, the Mayor of Nakawa Division. First and foremost, I would like to thank GSEF for giving me the opportunity to be on this platform. I would also like to thank UNRISD for the great opportunity. Yes, I do agree with almost all the policy guidelines given by Jenkins. It was a very good research, but I feel like a few things were left out. To me, I believe that we should have a policy guideline on innovation. Like you have seen recently during the COVID, we had quite a number of challenges and we needed new ideas, particularly to fight the COVID viruses. And that required us to basically to have a policy on innovation, new ideas. Then I also think that we needed a policy on inclusiveness. In Uganda, at least it has been a little brought out clearly that government of Uganda is against bias on gender. So anyone who is not gender sensitive, government does not usually support them. And therefore, we need a policy on inclusiveness. I also think that it is important to have a policy on procurement. Procurement, it is very, very vital. And management. Majority of our SSEs have basically collapsed because of poor management. And I believe that if we provided a policy guideline on management of SSEs, it would create a good ambience. SSEs is a vehicle to solve many of the national and local government's challenges, which basically include unemployment. And therefore, I agree that we need a very good environment for them to thrive. Here in Uganda, we have quite a number of challenges, some of which are political, to the extent of government putting in place hard, expensive, and bureaucratic procedures for SSEs to grow. And as you know, that majority of our SSEs are informal, and therefore, of vulnerable people, it's hard for them to register, for them to become formal. Therefore, we need a policy towards that, and we need government will. Basically, government, particularly during this time, political month, political year, they are very, very worried of even financing SSEs. So we have a very big challenge. I pray that you help us on giving us ideas on what we can do for that challenge of political will. With those few remarks, I want to appreciate all of you for the great opportunity. But I also think that since the greatest challenges are with the least developed countries, this research would have given those least developed countries a chance other than giving Dakar only. Because when you look at the GDP of these countries, you find out that majority of them, their GDP is very, very, very big compared to Dakar. So because SSEs are basically targeting to improve the quality of the vulnerable people, I would believe that would put more vulnerable countries in this research. Thank you so much. May God bless you.
Thank you very much, Ronald. I really appreciate your comments and remarks about several points you think which are very important, because those remarks kind of vindicated our positions or emphasis on those points about innovative ideas and procurement process and the management issues of SSE, because they are presented in our guidelines in very much detail. So I strongly recommend you to look at those chapters dealing with innovative ideas in communication, financing, and market strategies, and the procurement process in financing chapter and other chapters, and management issues in capacity building. And on another front, Tamidi, you emphasize the importance of giving more chances to developing countries in terms of research. I think that is also in line with our strategy to produce version 2.0, including more case studies on developing countries. So thank you very much for the remarks. And I will open the floor. We do not have much time, but I think we have around 15 minutes. So if you have any questions, raise your hand or write down your comments or questions in chat box, and I will pick up and we can discuss. Is there any? I cannot see raised hand. So maybe we can go back to the previous.
Margie has a comment.
Yeah, Margie, okay.
Okay, I apologize. I couldn't find the little blue hand. It disappeared. Just a quick comment. First of all, bravo, Hamish. It's your presentation was excellent, and I really look forward to reading the report. Apropos some of the comments that were made, and I'd like to draw on Maude's comments from Gatineau. And I think we mentioned it, and I don't remember if we mentioned it in the plenary this morning or in this session, but the paradox of the celebration of the innovation that social and solidarity economy represents, and then within the institutions that are, mandated to support them, whether it's municipal or regional or national government, but right now we're focusing on municipal, there are barriers, and those are cultural barriers and institutional barriers. So I think that it's not up to the social and solidarity economy to transform the institutional infrastructure of municipal administration. But on the other hand, we have enough illustrations to show that working across these boundaries, working horizontally and creating stakeholder spaces for ongoing dialogue is key. It's not going to happen any other way, because the social and solidarity economy is not the third sector. It isn't sectoral. It is cross-sectoral. It cuts across all divisions of government at all levels. So I think that this is something, we had a little experience of this in Canada, not just Quebec, when we had 1 year of a government that recognized the need to do that and actually created a space for the social and solidarity economy, including actors. Unfortunately, that government fell within a year, and this was not pursued. But this is a big challenge, is to move beyond siloed approaches to the social and solidarity economy. The other thing I just wanted to raise, and I guess it's a comment really to the research that Hamish did, and we can go back to that at another time. So I just want to flag it. I'm not a big fan of social impact bonds, and I think we need to discuss this. But on the other hand, if we're working at the municipal level, we've got illustrations that are historic. Municipal bonds. In Quebec now we have community bonds. There are green bonds, because the way in which social impact bonds have evolved is very top down. But I will park that for a moment. I'd like to just really emphasize the need on horizontality and stakeholder participation.
Thank you very much. We will collect the questions first, and then we will go back to Hamish and other team members like Samuel and me.
Okay, I see Roberto.
Roberto? Roberto, yes? You can unmute your microphone first.
Listo. Yo quisiera poner énfasis en
Well, I would like to place the emphasis on two or three things which I think are fundamental. The first of these is that there are different territories, different local areas, and the dynamics of building a social and solidarity economy are completely different from one place to the next. And they give a completely different discourse or a different explanation, a different approach to SSE. In Mexico, in particular, in our area, we had to find the right political conditions, very specific conditions, so that the law could actually be implemented. Otherwise, it would have been left, it would have been ignored, it would have been just left on the shelf, because the authorities showed no interest in working on it. So efforts had been made for decades. The most vulnerable sectors had been seeking out the best way to survive and the way to overcome marginalization. Therefore, solidarity is fundamental. And then if we look at Latin America in general, we can see that the issue of consolidating self-managed organizations is really moving forward. This helps to create visibility, and so we can see two very different dynamics going on. There is solidarity, there is the issue of freedom and many other principles in SSE. They take a very different form in Latin America. We have experiences with our municipality in this particular area, and we had to prove to them what we were able to do with the social and solidarity economy, so that the government would open up to us, so that they would call upon us, so that they would come to us, and so that they would work with us. But we had to prove it beforehand. We had to prove it ourselves. And so self-management and the strength of organizations of the social and solidarity economy, I believe that is fundamental, it is primordial, it is essential, and analyzing the political landscape is something that cannot be forgotten about. It's something that we really need. And another thing is talking about in SSE in Canada, in Spain, it's completely different in each area. France, it's completely different. And I think we really need to understand that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And is there any other questions or comments?
Yes, there is, by Leslie Huckfield.
Okay, Leslie, thank you very much for joining us. You have to unmute your microphone first. Okay.
I'm usually told to mute. Can I just say, for those of us in academia in Scotland, and I work at Glasgow Caledonian University, this is all very encouraging, very, very encouraging. I don't know how many colleagues participated in the event this afternoon, but there were in fact 750 participants at one stage this afternoon. And since that was a genuinely global audience, first of all, I find the process and the mechanisms and the ability to convene that kind of an audience very, very encouraging. But what was being said, many of us found even more encouraging. So congratulations for all of those who've been involved in the organizing. Let me just be a tiny bit controversial. Though obviously I support and would like to encourage the guidelines which are being developed, I think we need to recognize that we don't actually participate in all of this in a politically neutral context. We've got some forces which haven't been mentioned very often this afternoon and this evening, which spend a lot of time working very much against us. I'm talking about, and Margie mentioned this some time ago, we're talking about those who want to develop social impact bonds. We're talking those who want to develop social investment, impact investment. And all of this is nothing but a covert ploy to get more private capital into what we're trying to do. I have to say that it's a source of great regret for me that a lot of this comes from London. A lot of this comes from London. It comes from the British Council. It comes from the UK big accountancy firms, PricewaterhouseCoopers, KPMG, Ernst & Young, are pumping out this stuff all the time. And of course, they will be on our side because they see us as an opportunity of making business. So I have to say that while I welcome every single thing that's taking place, I think we need really to take heed of the fact that particularly during COVID, the other side, and I'm talking about international, multinational corporate capitalism, hasn't exactly gone to sleep. It's working on every single opportunity it can find. But perhaps the most encouraging thing to come out of these sessions that we've had so far are the sort of local state examples that obviously Alan was talking about in Liverpool. We had some examples from Barcelona. We've had some examples, obviously, from Quebec, which many of us have always found inspiring. When Scotland becomes independent, by the way, which is not very long to wait, I hope that much of what takes place in Scotland will be modelled on Quebec. So, yes, we have some local state examples, and I think we ought to be working more and more on how we can multiply, how we can support, how we can legislate, how we can plan and prepare for those local state examples. And I don't apologize. I hope that those local state examples will help us in the fight against international, multinational corporations, because they are not on our side.
Thank you very much. I think that is one of the whole ideas behind this project. I mean, I like Gramsci's kind of explanation about how to fight the capitalism or the powerful. I mean, it's a trench war, right? We have to entrench, or we have to reinforce our trenches first. And I think this guideline is going to reinforce our effort to establish policies and institutions for SSE. And that is the best way to fight kind of a unruly capitalism or international corporatism of businesses. I think there must be some other ways, but I think the first step towards the kind of winning the war against unruly capitalism is going to be reinforcing our policy efforts to promote SSE in our localities. And I will go back to Hamish, to answer those questions and comments. I think maybe Samuel or I can intervene after Hamish's responses to those questions if it is needed. Hamish, floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to apologize for my presentation because I was a bit under the weather when I pre-recorded this thing, and I hope it was just a flu and not something more serious like the COVID thingy. But anyway, I'm feeling a bit better today. And I would like to start with the comments by the Honorable Mayor of Kampala. And I think his points were absolutely essential. And I think Il Chong largely responded to them. But I'd like just to emphasize a point that he made in an earlier remark about the fact that in developing countries, the informal economy is largely invisible. And this is really, I think, one of the next big challenges to actually tackle, which is to understand why a large majority of organizations or associations of people who work on SSE prefer not to be on the radar screen of the official administration, because then they will face all sorts of difficulties in terms of taxes and things like that. But at the same time, one should try and find a way to bring visibility to what they're doing in a way that doesn't actually then fall down on them as a new administrative hassles that they don't want to face. So we looked quite closely at the case of Brazil, and what we found is that a large majority of informal actors either decide to stay in the informal economy, and then the only way to find out about their existence is through what we call a snowball mythology of trying to find people who know people, etc., and then they build up a larger repertoire of who are these actors. But those who decide to go into registration, they usually choose associations and sometimes enterprises, but then there are also difficulties there. So there are lots of administrative hurdles to actually figure out how to both support but also identify who these actors are who are under the radar screen. And I agree with you. I mean, this as Il-chung said, this was a first go. We had limited resources, and it's true that the majority of the case studies were in relatively resource-rich countries, with a few exceptions like Dakar and to some extent Durban. But really the next step is to delve into this question of working with the countries that have enormous potential but are, you know, under-resourced. And in that context, the tricky situation is to see how one can both activate the international development agenda around SSE, which to some extent it didn't come out so much in the Dakar presentation, but there are international development agencies that are supporting Senegal on SSE and other countries, but it's still not up to speed. But at the same time, the trick is how does one make sure that the SSE agenda doesn't become completely dependent on international development aid, and that this aid is really aimed at creating a process of self-sufficiency, which is, if we bring it down to the national and subnational level, it's the same thing. How can SSE organizations benefit from external support, but gradually become self-sufficient? Hello? The second point that the Honorable Mayor of Kampala mentioned was public procurement. I mean, that is a strategic angle which we tackle in the chapter on access to public and private markets. And there are a whole set of options for really activating the public procurement option to scale up SSE. The third point is, I think this was raised from our friends from Quebec, is on social bonds. I must say, from a personal level, I'm as skeptical as you on the social bonds, depending on how they're put in place. We put that in as an option, but it would be very interesting to see how one can avoid the the downsides that this option provides, which is also linked to the whole question of social impact investment, which, if you read the document, where we outline the schemes, but are also quite skeptical and show all the downsides that could happen, and it really depends on context. So your feedback on how to make sure that social bonds approaches are sustainable and not a manipulation would be very useful. On the question of political trends, local versus national and global, well, then I fully support what Il Chong said about very much using SSE, especially in this context of the COVID-19, where we have to basically consolidate local ways of producing and exchanging and consuming, is perhaps a blessing in disguise, in the sense that it'll inevitably force a localization of local economic circuits. And then, as a final point, I would like to explore ways in which this local bottom-up SSE agenda can tail in with the numerous calls for a global Green New Deal, which involves major macroeconomic changes, etc., but cannot and will not function if it's not driven from a bottom-up perspective through local SSE development. So, if we think of a 2.0, I would like to look at ways in which, we can look at more macroeconomic levels of this agenda in a way that connects with SSE around this global Green New Deal, which in one form or another will have to come into existence if we want to survive. So thank you.
Thank you very much. This guidelines is a collective effort. A lot of people have been involved in making this possible. And obviously, it was written by a group of authors, headed by Hamish Jenkins as a lead author. But we have another members like Samuel Brueli-Sauer. I'd like to have a comment or any intervention from Samuel on those questions or comments raised by our participants. Samuel, floor is yours.
Well, I think we are definitely in a timely phase now with these guidelines, right? So we do have a situation where many policies are being questioned, given this very particular circumstances with the COVID crisis, and we definitely do have relatively hands-on instructions that local governments and policymakers around the world can use now in this very particular moment of building back better, or whatever terminology we want to use for that. But I think this is really a timely discussion that we're having now, and to see that still after 3.5 hours of presentation, still 90 people are here. This is great to observe. I'm very, very thankful for everybody who joined today, for all your very valuable inputs that we're going to consider. I think Il Chong and Hamish and I will definitely listen to this whole discussion tomorrow towards the end of the week, and are really looking forward to soon provide you, or like to publish the revised version of the guidelines as well, and to all have you on board also for the ongoing process as we keep talking and writing about public policies for the promotion of the SSE. So from my side, really a great thanks to you all for writing these very valuable case studies, and for giving us your very valuable inputs. And I think this is a great basis for us to keep going our work on these public policy guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a long session from the beginning to the end, and now we are close to the end. This is just first step to produce these guidelines. So we need your support, feedback, comments, questions. which can improve the quality of guidelines. So please give us feedback and comments and questions on these guidelines within a week. We do not have much time though, so it should be within a week. On behalf of UNRI's research team, I'd like to thank all those support from GSEF, Global Social Economy Forum, Lawrence Kwok, and Aram Kim, Martin Ho, and all those staffs of GSEF. I mean, throughout the project, they've been very much resourceful and supportive of our efforts, and they were very much helpful. And without their support and help, it could have been impossible to make this guideline. And lastly, I'd like to thank you all. As Samuel mentioned, I mean, I never seen this kind of same number of participants, which I saw at the beginning of this session at the end. So I really thank you for all your participation and patience about kind of hiccups of the process of this session. And I look forward to your comments and questions, and we will keep in touch in many ways. And I hope you and all you care about are safe and healthy in this COVID-19 crisis. Thank you very much. We better stop now. Thank you. Bye-bye.